A captivating journey through the annals of ancient Greece and its timeless narratives is about to unfold. Imagine yourself traversing the undulating hills of ancient Corinth on a balmy evening, roughly 2.5 millennia ago. The gentle Mediterranean zephyr whispers through the olive groves, carrying with it the faint, rhythmic murmur of waves caressing the rocky shorelines. Your destination is the opulent palace of King Sisyphus, though you remain unaware that this particular monarch is destined for an extraordinary, albeit profoundly arduous, renown. Sisyphus was not always condemned to the eternal, back-breaking toil of rolling a colossal boulder uphill. That segment of his legend, a grueling and relentless punishment, would manifest much later. At this juncture in the unfolding saga, he is very much alive, presiding over the flourishing city-state of Corinth. He grapples with a peculiar predicament, one that many rulers might paradoxically envy. He is simply too cunning for his own good. It appears Sisyphus has unearthed a secret, a profound truth that mortals were never meant to comprehend. He has discovered a method to circumvent the inevitability of death itself. But before delving into the audacious specifics, it is prudent to commence at the very beginning of this remarkable tale. Envision your daily life as a citizen of Corinth during the reign of King Sisyphus. Each morning, you awaken to the bustling symphony of merchants meticulously arranging their wares in the agora, the vibrant marketplace. The enticing aroma of freshly baked bread mingles harmoniously with the invigorating, saline air wafting in from the bustling harbor. Daily, vessels dock, laden with exquisite pottery from Athens, luxurious silks from far-flung, exotic lands, and enthralling narratives spun by intrepid travelers who have journeyed across the known world. Your sovereign, King Sisyphus, is renowned for 3 distinct characteristics that set him apart. Firstly, his intellect is unparalleled. He possesses a mind so acutely sharp that murmurs circulate suggesting he might even outmaneuver the Olympian gods themselves. Secondly, under his astute leadership, Corinth has blossomed into one of the most affluent and influential cities throughout the entirety of Greece. And thirdly, while his honesty might not be entirely unimpeachable, his subtle deceptions often paradoxically benefit those around him, ensuring that widespread complaints remain notably subdued. One might frequently observe Sisyphus in the early hours, strolling through the labyrinthine city streets with a deliberate, measured gait. Unlike other monarchs who might rush through their duties, he maintains a thoughtful pace, meticulously observing every detail. The meticulous arrangement of goods by vendors, the efficient loading of ships at the harbor, and the preferred routes taken by weary travelers. His mind is an unceasing engine of thought and strategizing, perpetually weaving intricate connections like a spider meticulously spinning an invisible yet immensely strong web, discerning intricate patterns and subtle nuances that elude the perception of ordinary individuals. On one particular morning, an anomaly disrupts the accustomed rhythm of the city. As you select ripe olives from your favored purveyor, your attention is drawn to a figure cloaked in dark garments, moving silently through the bustling marketplace. This individual is neither engaged in commerce nor conversing with anyone. He simply observes. There is an inexplicable aura about him, compelling people to instinctively step aside, almost without conscious thought. Shadows seem to cling to his form, and conversations subtly diminish as he passes. This enigmatic stranger is Thanatos, the very embodiment of death, though his true identity remains concealed from the common folk. He has arrived in Corinth on a matter of grave official business. A designated soul is slated to depart this earthly realm today, and Thanatos has come to fulfill his solemn duty. The unsettling complication, however, is that the individual he has come to claim is none other than King Sisyphus himself. However, Sisyphus, in his characteristic brilliance, has been anticipating this fateful visit for a considerable duration. Recall, his intellect is legendary. He has discerned intricate patterns that others invariably overlook, noticing subtle shifts in timing and the peculiar unfolding of certain events. Consequently, a strong suspicion has taken root within him that his appointed time might be drawing near. Thus, when Thanatos materializes at the royal palace that evening, Sisyphus extends a welcome befitting an old and cherished acquaintance. "Welcome, welcome," he intones, his voice smooth and inviting, gesturing toward the finest amphora of wine and the most sumptuously cushioned chair. "You must be weary from your extensive journey. Please do sit and find your rest." Now, Thanatos is unaccustomed to such cordial invitations to sit and engage in leisurely conversation. Most mortals either flee in terror, their screams echoing through the air, or stoically resign themselves to their inevitable fate. This unexpectedly warm reception is a curious deviation from his usual encounters, and Thanatos, despite being the very personification of death, finds himself intrigued by the potential trajectory of this unusual dialogue. "I presume you are aware of the reason for my presence," Thanatos states, settling into the comfortable chair, a subtle acknowledgement of the excellent vintage he has just sampled. "Oh, absolutely," Sisyphus replies with a knowing smile. "And I must confess, I am profoundly impressed by the meticulousness of your work, the precision, the impeccable timing, the masterful way you manage to maintain such a delicate balance across all transitions. It must be an incredibly intricate undertaking to coordinate such a vast array of departures." Thanatos, to his own surprise, finds himself nodding in agreement. Indeed, his work is profoundly complex, and it is exceedingly rare for anyone to genuinely appreciate the immense skill and intricate coordination involved. He takes another contemplative sip of the exquisite wine, allowing the conversation to gracefully continue. "But tell me," Sisyphus persists, his tone brimming with an almost childlike curiosity, "how precisely does it all function? The intricate mechanism, I mean. I have always harbored a deep fascination for clever contraptions. Take these chains, for instance." He gestures toward an elaborate set of gleaming silver chains meticulously displayed upon the wall. They are purported to be utterly unbreakable, according to the master smith who forged them. Yet, I have often pondered, how would one even begin to genuinely test such an audacious claim? And it is precisely at this juncture that Sisyphus's legendary reputation for unparalleled cunning truly shines forth. For through an artful combination of feigned intellectual curiosity, subtle yet potent flattery, and the persuasive influence of exceptionally fine wine, he manages to convince Thanatos to don the chains, purely for the sake of a professional, albeit unconventional, demonstration. The implications are staggering, yet the ruse is executed with masterful precision. The very instant those elaborate chains click securely shut around Thanatos's wrists, the fabric of reality itself undergoes a profound alteration. Death, the ultimate arbiter of existence, is now ensnared within Sisyphus's opulent palace, seated in a comfortable chair, looking remarkably, almost comically, embarrassed. "This is rather awkward," Thanatos reluctantly admits, a hint of surprise in his voice. "For you, perhaps," Sisyphus retorts, a triumphant smile playing upon his lips. "For me, it is proving to be remarkably convenient." And so commences the most peculiar and unprecedented period in the annals of both Corinth and, indeed, the entire known world, with Death himself bound and shackled within the confines of the palace. The ultimate certainty of existence is temporarily suspended. No one can perish. Not within the prosperous city of Corinth, nor anywhere else across the vast expanse of the world. The elderly continue to age, yet they do not find the peaceful repose of death. Warriors on distant battlefields sustain mortal wounds, yet inexplicably, they continue to fight with an uncanny, unnatural vigor. Across the land, people slowly begin to perceive that something profoundly fundamental has been irrevocably altered within the natural order of things. For Sisyphus, this extraordinary turn of events is nothing short of perfection. He has achieved the clandestine dream of every mortal being. He has definitively vanquished death. He dedicates his days to the leisurely governance of Corinth, indulging in protracted, lavish dinners with his beloved wife, Merope, and contemplatively observing the breathtaking sunsets from the expansive balcony of his palace. He has seemingly triumphed in the ultimate game of life. Yet the taste of victory is not always as profoundly satisfying as one might anticipate. After a few weeks have elapsed, Sisyphus observes a curious phenomenon. Thanatos, despite being physically restrained, does not appear particularly distressed by his peculiar predicament. In fact, he seems almost subtly amused by the entire affair. "Are you thoroughly enjoying your victory?" Thanatos inquires one evening, his voice laced with an enigmatic undertone. "Thoroughly," Sisyphus replies, though a faint prickle of unease is stirred by the peculiar inflection in Thanatos's voice. "Good, good," Thanatos muses, a knowing smile playing upon his lips. "I sincerely hope you savor every moment of it, because you must understand that eventually my esteemed colleagues will undoubtedly notice my prolonged absence and my failure to report back. And when they do..." Thanatos allows his sentence to trail off, the unspoken implication hanging heavily in the air. It is at this precise moment that Sisyphus experiences a chilling realization. He may have indeed won a singular battle, but the overarching war against the cosmic order remains far from decided. The gods, as it turns out, possess a distinct aversion to having their fundamental, meticulously established systems disrupted, even by the most ingenious and audacious of mortal kings. Still, for the present, in this unique and fleeting moment, Sisyphus has accomplished the seemingly impossible. He sits comfortably within his grand palace, undeniably alive, having cunningly outmaneuvered death itself. The fading evening light streams through the towering windows, bathing everything in a soft, ethereal, golden glow. Somewhere in the tranquil distance, ships are gracefully returning to the bustling harbor, their sails billowing majestically, catching the very last gentle breeze of the day. And in his surprisingly comfortable chair, Thanatos waits with an unnerving patience, fully aware that all mortal victories are inherently ephemeral, and that the extraordinary tale of Sisyphus has, in truth, only just begun. Now transport yourself 3 weeks into the future, following the unprecedented chaining of Thanatos within the regal palace of Corinth. The initial surge of excitement and disbelief surrounding this impossible event has gradually subsided, giving way to an even stranger, more unsettling reality, a world where the most fundamental and inescapable aspect of existence has simply ceased to occur. Each morning, you awaken into this new, bizarre reality where death has, quite literally, taken an unexpected and prolonged vacation. At first, the profound shift goes largely unnoticed. After all, death is not an everyday occurrence for every individual. However, slowly, incrementally, people across Corinth and beyond begin to grasp that something truly fundamental has been irrevocably altered. The venerable old man who diligently runs the pottery shop, who has been plagued by a persistent, debilitating cough for many months, continues to cough, yet his condition, against all natural expectations, does not worsen. The unfortunate woman who plummeted from her roof last week, an accident that should have resulted in fatal injuries, is now inexplicably walking about, albeit with severely broken bones that should have proven lethal, her primary complaint being the sheer inconvenience of her predicament. One might initially perceive this scenario as a utopian dream. No more profound grief, no more unbearable loss, no more heart-wrenching goodbyes to cherished loved ones. Yet, as the days inexorably lengthen, a disconcerting truth begins to emerge. Immortality, in this unexpected form, is not quite the unmitigated gift it initially appears to be. Let us delve into a single day within this death-free world to fully comprehend its peculiar implications. You awaken in your modest dwelling, nestled intimately near the bustling Corinth marketplace. Outside your window, the familiar symphony of morning sounds greets you, the cheerful clamor of merchants meticulously preparing their stalls, the joyous shouts of children at play in the sun-drenched streets, and the distant, soothing rhythm of waves gently caressing the harbor shore. Everything appears outwardly normal, precisely as it should be. However, upon your journey to purchase freshly baked bread from the local baker, you observe a most peculiar sight. The baker's grandfather, a man who has been confined to his bed, gravely ill for many months, is now inexplicably up and actively assisting in the shop. He moves with a profound slowness, his breathing audibly labored, and his eyes betray a deep-seated weariness that transcends mere lack of sleep. Yet, he is working because apparently he simply cannot die. How is your esteemed grandfather feeling today? You inquire, a subtle note of curiosity in your voice, to the baker. The baker casts a weary glance toward the old man, then offers a resigned shrug. He should have found his peaceful rest weeks ago, he laments, his voice heavy with a peculiar blend of frustration and sorrow. Now, he is simply stuck. We are at a loss as to what to do for him. He is clearly in constant pain, yet he is denied the ultimate solace of rest. This, then, is the unforeseen, darker consequence of Sisyphus's audacious victory. Without the finality of death, suffering does not culminate. Instead, it merely prolongs itself indefinitely. The fundamental, natural rhythm that permits the aged to find their repose and gracefully make way for the vibrant energy of the young has been utterly and profoundly disrupted, casting a long, unsettling shadow over Sisyphus's seemingly triumphant conquest. Within the opulent royal residence, King Sisyphus was observed partaking of his morning wine in the company of Thanatos, who, despite his continued imprisonment, proved remarkably articulate and communicative. Over the preceding several weeks, An unconventional custom had gradually been cultivated between the two figures. Sisyphus diligently provided his captive with sustenance and libations, and in return, they engaged in profound discourse encompassing philosophical tenets, political machinations, and the intricate workings of human demise. "Pray tell," Sisyphus inquired, as he meticulously dispensed the crimson liquid into both goblets. "Does not ennui afflict your eternal existence, given the ceaseless acquisition of mortal spirits, an unending task spanning countless days and innumerable centuries?" Thanatos, in turn, pondered the query, all the while scrutinizing the shackles that bound him. He begrudgingly conceded their exquisite artistry. "One might find the reality rather astonishing," he mused. "The human experience of confronting mortality manifests in myriad ways. Individuals exhibit a spectrum of reactions. Some fiercely resist, others embrace their fate with resignation, while still others endeavor to negotiate their inevitable end. It proves a remarkably diverse and multifaceted occupation." "What, then, is your current assessment of the situation?" inquired Sisyphus, his gaze fixed upon his companion. "Presently," Thanatos responded, "I am engaged in the convivial act of imbibing wine with an exceptionally astute monarch, whilst observing the gradual dawning of comprehension across the mortal realm, that the cessation of life, contrary to popular belief, might not be an altogether dreadful prospect." Verily, dispatches and unsettling tidings had commenced their journey, converging upon Corinth from various Hellenic territories. A herald appeared, bearing disquieting communiques that instilled a pervasive sense of apprehension among the populace. In the venerable city of Athens, for instance, an aged matron had languished for 7 days beneath the debris of a collapsed edifice. Her severe injuries notwithstanding, she was inexplicably denied the release of death. Concurrently, in the martial state of Sparta, fierce engagements unfolded wherein combatants sustained injuries unequivocally deemed lethal, yet none succumbed to their grievous afflictions. The fields of conflict teemed with individuals whose vital signs should have long since departed, but who, defying all natural expectation, persisted in their struggles, enduring sword cuts that, under ordinary circumstances, would prove instantly fatal. Clearly, the fundamental cosmic equilibrium, the very fabric of existence, was visibly fraying, engendering unforeseen complications and unprecedented dilemmas across the mortal realm. However, the true gravity of the predicament became manifest when intelligence finally ascended to the celestial heights of Mount Olympus. The Olympian deities, engrossed in their celestial preoccupations, had not immediately perceived the abrupt cessation of their meticulously ordered cosmic apparatus. Ultimately, Hades, the sovereign ruler of the chthonic realms, apprehended that a distinct absence of recently departed spirits had persisted for a considerable duration. He initially surmised this anomaly to be a mere lull in the natural cycle, perhaps an extraordinary period of tranquility and robust well-being among humanity. However, as successive days transmuted into protracted weeks without any new ingress of souls, he initiated a comprehensive inquiry. When his investigations ultimately unveiled the inexplicable disappearance of Thanatos, it was at this critical juncture that events truly began to unfold with heightened intrigue. Meanwhile, within the bustling city of Corinth, the inhabitants pursued their quotidian activities when they began to perceive an ominous phenomenon that sent shivers down their spines. The cerulean expanse above, hitherto brilliant and unblemished, abruptly assumed a somber hue, not from the gathering of atmospheric vapors, but from an indefinable, formidable presence. The ambient atmosphere itself appeared to congeal, heavy with the palpable emanation of celestial wrath. King Sisyphus, ensconced within his regal abode, experienced this profound atmospheric shift as well. He was seated opposite Thanatos, engaging in their now established ritual of sharing an afternoon vintage, when the ambient temperature within the chamber precipitously declined. "It is my considered estimation," Thanatos remarked with an uncharacteristic placidity, "that the approaching entity is none other than Ares." Sisyphus, for his part, endeavored to maintain an unwavering cadence in his speech. "The formidable deity of martial conflict," he acknowledged. "He is evidently incensed by the recent, unprecedented disruptions plaguing the fields of combat. He has been dispatched by Hades, sovereign of the underworld, to conduct a thorough inquiry." And precisely as foretold, the grand portals of the palace spontaneously flung themselves inward, untouched by mortal hands. Into the chamber strode Ares, the very embodiment of war, his demeanor betraying an undeniable and profound displeasure. His towering, broad-shouldered physique was encased in panoply that appeared to drink in the ambient illumination rather than casting it back. His piercing gaze blazed with an inferno of wrath, reminiscent of the accumulated fury of 1,000 conflicts. With a voice like thunder, Ares demanded, "What nefarious deed have you wrought, Sisyphus?" Commendably, Sisyphus did not immediately succumb to an unseemly panic. He rose with deliberate grace, executed a deferential bow, and motioned towards an available seat. "Lord Ares," he began, his tone remarkably composed, "a most esteemed welcome to my humble palace. Might I prevail upon you to partake in some of our finest vintage?" Voyons, Ares' fiery gaze swept from the bound form of Thanatos to the audacious king, and then back to the personification of death. "Do you, in all earnestness," he thundered, "proffer me libations whilst simultaneously holding the very essence of mortality in captivity?" "Indeed," Sisyphus rejoined with an air of disarming rationality. "It struck me as the appropriate and courteous course of action." For a fleeting instant, Ares found himself utterly flummoxed by the sheer temerity of Sisyphus's reply, rendering him momentarily speechless. Here stood a mere mortal sovereign, who had, by some inexplicable means, ensnared the very personification of death, thereby plunging the entire cosmic equilibrium into profound disarray. And yet he proffered hospitalities as if presiding over a casual social engagement. However, Ares swiftly regained his composure, executing a seemingly nonchalant gesture that nonetheless resonated with the formidable might of Olympian divinity. With an unseen exertion of will, he utterly annihilated the formidable chains restraining Thanatos. The shattered silver links cascaded across the polished flagstones, scattering like ephemeral droplets of water. "My gratitude," Thanatos uttered, as he languidly extended his limbs, savoring his newfound freedom. Those restraints had, I must confess, become quite irksome. Sisyphus observed his meticulously engineered triumph crumble into dust before his very gaze. Yet even in this perilous moment, confronted by the unbridled fury of the divine pantheon, his cunning intellect remained relentlessly active. For Sisyphus, it was widely known, was a strategist whose machinations were seldom truly concluded. "Ere you convey me to the realm of the departed," he addressed Thanatos, "might I be granted the indulgence of a solitary minor request?" Both divine beings regarded him with a shared expression of profound astonishment. Jean. The typical response of a mortal, when confronted with their demise after such a brazen act of deception, was invariably to supplicate for clemency, or to attempt a desperate flight. They certainly did not presume to solicit concessions. "What manner of boon do you seek?" inquired Thanatos, a flicker of involuntary curiosity illuminating his features. It was at this precise juncture that Sisyphus unveiled the intricacies of his subsequent stratagem. For despite the apparent reversal of his fortunes in the preceding encounter, his strategic intellect had already charted a course several steps into the future. The contest, in his astute estimation, was far from its ultimate conclusion. With the descent of twilight upon Corinth, and as the fundamental cosmic equilibrium commenced its global reassertion, throughout the world, individuals perceived a nuanced yet profound alteration. The venerable patriarch of the local potter's lineage at last closed his weary eyes, embracing the tranquility of eternal slumber. The grievously injured combatants on remote fields of conflict finally obtained the repose that had been so cruelly withheld from them. The unfortunate Athenian matron, ensnared beneath the rubble of the collapsed edifice, was at long last liberated from her prolonged agony. Mortality had thus been reinstated into the fabric of existence, as inherent and indispensable as the very act of respiration. Nevertheless, an astute observer might discern that Sisyphus's intricate narrative with the harbinger of demise was far from its ultimate denouement. For a mortal mind, ingenious enough to shackle the personification of death itself, undoubtedly possessed a repertoire of stratagems exceeding a singular deception. One might recall the specific concessions Sisyphus had entreated, precisely as Thanatos prepared to escort him to the afterlife. Indeed, that seemingly minor request was poised to fundamentally redefine all prevailing perceptions regarding the cunning monarch of Corinth. Let us envision the scene within the palace courtyard on the ensuing morning. The atmosphere was remarkably crisp, redolent with the verdant aroma of olive groves and the saline tang carried from the distant sea. An observer might reasonably anticipate discovering the royal abode shrouded in somber fabrics of mourning, with retainers openly lamenting their departed sovereign. Instead, what presented itself was considerably more perplexing. The palace presented an utterly unremarkable aspect. There were no visible signs of bereavement, no customary funeral arrangements underway, nor any evidence of a grief-stricken queen. Indeed, Queen Merope was observed engaging in her usual quotidian activities, as if completely oblivious to any extraordinary recent occurrences. She was engaged in discussions regarding culinary arrangements with the royal chef, scrutinizing commercial accords with visiting merchants, and generally conducting herself in a manner entirely consistent with a woman whose consort remained very much among the living. Yet a crucial paradox presented itself. Sisyphus, in actuality, no longer breathed the air of the living. Thanatos had unequivocally claimed him. Witnesses had observed the event firsthand. Or more precisely, they had beheld the formidable deity of death escorting the monarch into the shadowy realm to which all mortals are ultimately destined. The perplexing question then arose: why did his royal consort conduct herself as if her husband had merely embarked upon a casual stroll? To fully comprehend the unfolding enigma, it becomes imperative to revisit the specific concessions Sisyphus had entreated. In the terminal moments of their lives, the majority of mortals typically plead for an extension of their existence, or for clemency, or merely for a final opportunity to bid farewell. Sisyphus, however, had articulated a request of far greater specificity, and as subsequent events would reveal, of profoundly superior ingenuity. "Prior to my departure with you," he conveyed to Thanatos, "I desire to ensure the meticulous arrangement of my royal affairs. One must grasp the exigency of such matters, as a reigning monarch. After all, I am bound by considerable obligations." Thanatos, having recently endured several weeks in captivity owing to Sisyphus's cunning stratagems, evinced a wholly predictable degree of circumspection. "What precisely do you signify by affairs?" he probed with suspicion. "Nothing of a dramatic nature," Sisyphus reassured him with feigned nonchalance. "Merely a brief colloquy with my royal consort, specific directives concerning my funeral obsequies, and the meticulous execution of the requisite ceremonies. The profound significance of such observances is, of course, well understood." It was, in fact, an undeniable truth that funeral rites held immense, sacrosanct importance within the cultural framework of ancient Greece. Lacking the duly performed observances, a departed soul was condemned to perpetual disquiet, unable to attain serenity within the chthonic realms. Even the Olympian deities themselves accorded due reverence to this venerable tradition. Consequently, Thanatos acquiesced to Sisyphus's plea, granting him leave to converse with his wife prior to their final departure. The subsequent event was the fateful colloquy between Sisyphus and Queen Merope. However, it proved to be a dialogue far removed from the conventional exchange one might anticipate between a royal couple confronting an imminent and eternal severance. "Attend closely," Sisyphus instructed her, his voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper, ensuring that Thanatos remained beyond earshot. "Upon my imminent demise, which is now assuredly nigh, you are expressly forbidden to perform the customary funeral rites." Merope's countenance registered profound bewilderment. "What precisely do you intend by such an extraordinary directive?" she queried. "There shall be no funeral pyre constructed," Sisyphus elaborated. "No propitiatory offerings presented to the gods. No obols placed upon my eyelids for the infernal ferryman. Absolutely nothing of the customary observances. Permit all to believe that you have merely become neglectful regarding these significant affairs." "Yet," Merope countered, her voice laced with concern, "without the due performance of the sacred rites, your very essence, your soul, will be irrevocably ensnared." "Precisely," Sisyphus affirmed, a familiar, knowing smile gracing his lips, a smile that invariably signaled his intellectual superiority, placing him several stratagems beyond the comprehension of others. "Place your unquestioning faith in this particular directive." Thus, when Thanatos ultimately escorted Sisyphus to the chthonic domains, Queen Merope executed her husband's directives with meticulous fidelity. She resumed her quotidian activities without deviation. No arrangements for his obsequies were initiated. Her demeanor conveyed the distinct impression that her consort had merely embarked upon a commercial journey and would duly reappear upon its conclusion. To fully appreciate the unfolding narrative, one must now trace Sisyphus's experiences within the dominion of the deceased. The chthonic realm, it must be clarified, does not conform to the fiery, torment-ridden depictions prevalent in certain mythic narratives. Rather, it presents itself as an expansive, somber bureaucracy, an interminable labyrinth of chambers and passageways, wherein disembodied spirits undergo systematic processing, judicial evaluation, and subsequent allocation to their perpetual abodes. King Sisyphus, upon his inevitable demise, made his ingress into the shadowy domains of the underworld, where he was promptly directed, as were all recently departed souls, toward the gloomy banks of the river Styx. There, it was customary for him to tender 2 obols to Charon, the venerable ferryman, as recompense for safe passage across the formidable river. These essential coins, however, ought to have been meticulously placed upon his eyelids during the solemnity of his funeral rites. Yet, in a stark deviation from tradition, no such funerary ceremonies had taken place for Sisyphus, rendering him utterly devoid of the requisite payment. "My sincerest apologies," Sisyphus purportedly uttered to Charon, his voice laced with feigned regret. "But it appears a regrettable oversight has occurred. My beloved wife was entrusted with the crucial task of providing the necessary fare, but alas, it seems to have slipped her mind entirely." Charon, a grizzled figure who had diligently navigated the spectral waters of the Styx for myriad millennia, possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of every conceivable human predicament. However, the astonishing scenario of a deceased individual whose surviving kin had simply neglected to execute the proper burial rites was so profoundly unusual that it presented a genuine, unprecedented administrative quandary. "Without the stipulated fare, I am regrettably unable to transport you across," Charon elucidated with a tone of unyielding adherence to protocol. "Such are the immutable regulations of this realm." Naturally, Sisyphus responded with an air of profound understanding and false deference. "I grasp the situation completely. Rules are, after all, inviolable rules. But surely there exists some venerable authority to whom I might appeal regarding this matter, perhaps an established process for administrative review." And thus, Sisyphus found himself ensnared in what could only be described as the underworld's peculiar equivalent of a protracted customer service complaint. He was unceremoniously shunted from one minor functionary to another, each perplexed official wrestling with the conundrum of how to appropriately process a soul technically barred from proceeding to final judgment due to the glaring omission of requisite funerary formalities. Eventually, this vexing matter ascended through the infernal hierarchy, ultimately landing upon the desk of Hades himself. The formidable sovereign of the underworld was ensconced upon his obsidian throne, diligently poring over the day's ceaseless stream of parchment and decrees, when a visibly apprehensive aide tentatively approached his august presence. "My revered lord," the aide stammered, his voice betraying a tremor of unease, "we are confronted with a most peculiar predicament. There is a soul presently awaiting disposition who cannot be properly processed, as the customary funeral rites were, regrettably, never performed for him." Hades, with an almost imperceptible shift, lifted his gaze from the stacks of bureaucratic documents. "Never performed, you say? That is indeed an anomaly. And what explanation does this particular soul offer for such an egregious omission?" "He contends that his wife merely overlooked the obligation, my lord," the aide relayed, "and he appears to be rather distressed by the entire affair." Now, Hades was a deity not easily deceived. Having presided over the vast dominion of the underworld for untold eons, he had witnessed every conceivable stratagem and deception concocted by mortal minds. Yet this particular narrative, a wife genuinely forgetting to conduct the solemn funeral rites for her deceased husband, was so utterly improbable so profoundly out of character for mortal devotion that it held a perverse ring of authenticity, making it almost believable. When Sisyphus was finally ushered into the awe-inspiring presence of the throne, he presented his fabricated case with a masterful display of perfect sincerity. He articulated profound shock and palpable dismay that his ostensibly beloved wife could have exhibited such egregious negligence. He voiced deep concern regarding the implications this oversight might hold for the sanctity of their marital bond, and he openly fretted about the inevitable scandal this unprecedented lapse would undoubtedly ignite back in his bustling city of Corinth. "This situation is profoundly disquieting," he declared to Hades, his voice imbued with a carefully modulated sorrow. "My poor Merope must be utterly consumed by an overwhelming torrent of grief. It is, I believe, the only plausible explanation for her regrettable lapse in remembering the essential rites. She is, quite clearly, not in a state of sound judgment." Hades, with an inscrutable gaze, meticulously scrutinized this unusual mortal. There was an elusive quality about Sisyphus that stirred a faint sense of familiarity within the god's ancient memory, though he could not quite pinpoint its origin. "And what course of action would you then propose we undertake to rectify this most singular situation?" "Well," Sisyphus mused thoughtfully, his eyes casting a seemingly innocent glance heavenward, "I suppose it would necessitate someone journeying back to Corinth to gently remind my wife of her sacred duties, and to ensure that the proper ceremonies are, at long last, meticulously performed. But who, pray tell, could possibly undertake such a vital mission?" "Are you, by chance, suggesting—" Hades began, a flicker of understanding crossing his ancient features. "Oh, I would never presume to offer a direct suggestion to a mighty god," Sisyphus interjected swiftly, his tone steeped in humble reverence. "However, if by some divine magnanimity an individual were to be temporarily restored to life, just long enough to meticulously rectify this unforeseen administrative error, I would, without question, be eternally indebted." And it was precisely at this pivotal juncture that Hades committed the colossal misjudgment upon which Sisyphus had so meticulously gambled. Confronted with an utterly unprecedented bureaucratic conundrum and presented with what appeared to be a logically sound and expedient resolution, the august god of the underworld, swayed by the sheer administrative convenience, granted Sisyphus a temporary reprieve, permitting his return to the realm of the living to orchestrate his own long-overdue funeral arrangements. 3 days, Hades pronounced with an air of absolute finality. "You are allotted precisely 3 days to ensure the meticulous performance of the proper rites. Following that, you shall return to this domain without delay, immediately." "Of course, my most esteemed lord," Sisyphus responded with an unctuous bow, his voice brimming with feigned obedience. 3 days will be far more than ample for the task at hand." And so, King Sisyphus found himself miraculously transported back into the vibrant tapestry of the mortal world, ostensibly for a mere 3 days. His supposed mission was solely to meticulously arrange his own posthumous ceremonies. One can, with reasonable certainty, surmise the degree of seriousness with which he ultimately regarded these divinely imposed limitations. As he strode through the grand palace doors that very evening, Queen Merope greeted him with a smile, though it barely managed to conceal an underlying current of palpable nervousness. "How did your discussion proceed?" she inquired, her voice a hushed whisper. flawlessly," Sisyphus declared with an air of absolute triumph. "Though I strongly suspect we may find ourselves with a considerable amount of explaining to do in a matter of days." As the resplendent sun began its descent over the ancient city of Corinth, painting the vast expanse of the sky in breathtaking hues of molten gold and fiery crimson, Sisyphus stood majestically upon his palace balcony, undeniably alive in a world where, by all cosmic reckoning, he ought to have been irrevocably deceased. The gentle Mediterranean breeze, carrying the familiar symphony of his thriving city, caressed his face. The distant calls of merchants securing their stalls, the playful shouts of children being summoned for their evening repasts, and the rhythmic, soothing murmur of waves against the bustling harbor. He had, against all odds, once again achieved the impossible. He had not merely evaded the clutches of death. He had, with unparalleled cunning, persuaded the very embodiment of mortality to courteously escort him back to the vibrant realm of life. Yet, as he observed the nascent stars begin to speckle the rapidly darkening firmament, Sisyphus might have harbored a fleeting suspicion that perhaps his ingenious machinations had, this time, ventured a touch too far. After all, the Olympian deities possessed an extraordinarily long memory, and they held little appreciation for being made to appear foolish in the eyes of the cosmos. Those 3 precious days that Hades had magnanimously bestowed upon Sisyphus, well, they transpired and vanished precisely as one might anticipate from a monarch renowned for once having audaciously enchained death itself. Envision, if you will, a bustling street scene in Corinth, a full 6 months after Sisyphus was definitively mandated to return to the somber depths of the underworld. The morning market thrummed with its customary vibrant activity. Merchants vociferously hawked their diverse wares, and children frolicked with unbridled glee in the sun-drenched thoroughfares. And there, amidst the lively throng, meticulously inspecting a particularly exquisite piece of pottery at one of the stalls, stood none other than King Sisyphus himself, very much alive, and evidently relishing his considerably extended sabbatical from the clutches of eternal oblivion. You see, once those initial 3 days had irrevocably elapsed, Sisyphus made a rather astonishing revelation. He discerned, with a growing sense of audacious satisfaction, that absolutely no one from the underworld was making any discernible effort to reclaim him. Apparently, the infernal bureaucracy operated under a peculiar, almost whimsical honor system when it came to temporary resurrections. They had, quite simply, expected him to honor his solemn pledge and return precisely as promised. This, as one can readily surmise, represented a monumental miscalculation on the part of the chthonic powers. Sisyphus, consequently, devoted those ensuing months to indulging in precisely what brought him the most profound gratification, assiduously governing his prosperous city, luxuriating in the myriad pleasures of mortal existence, and basking in an overwhelming sense of self-congratulation for having, yet again, so masterfully outmaneuvered the formidable gods. Not merely once, nor twice, but now a staggering 3 times had he defied divine will. He had first bound Thanatos, then cajoled Hades into granting him a temporary reprieve to life, and subsequently, with unparalleled audacity, he had simply chosen to remain. However, divine patience, while undeniably vast and enduring, is by no means infinite. And inevitably, the Olympian deities finally became cognizant of the inconvenient fact that their ostensibly temporary resurrection had, rather inconveniently, transmogrified into a decidedly permanent arrangement. The second time the gods dispatched their agents for Sisyphus, they did not deign to send the primordial entity Thanatos. They eschewed the niceties of due process and entirely bypassed the labyrinthine bureaucratic procedures. This time, their chosen emissary was Hermes, the swift-footed messenger god, armed with exceedingly precise and uncompromising directives. Retrieve Sisyphus immediately, employing any means deemed necessary, and deliver him without further ado to the underworld, his rightful and overdue abode. Hermes made his unheralded appearance in the opulent palace throne room one unremarkable Tuesday morning, precisely as Sisyphus was intently reviewing a stack of complex trade agreements. There was no dramatic fanfare, no resonant peals of thunder, nor any ostentatious supernatural phenomena accompanying his arrival. One moment, the expansive chamber was utterly vacant, save for the king and his scrolls, and the very next, a youthful figure clad in the unassuming attire of a traveler stood silently, almost casually, beside the royal throne. "Sisyphus," Hermes remarked pleasantly, his voice carrying an undertone of subtle reproach. "You are considerably behind schedule." Sisyphus, startled, reluctantly lifted his gaze from the intricate details of his scrolls. "Late for what, pray tell?" "Your long overdue appointment with eternity," Hermes elucidated, his tone unyielding. "You were unequivocally expected to return to the underworld a full 6 months past." "Ah, all that," Sisyphus replied dismissively, a casual wave of his hand accompanying his words. "Yes, I have indeed been meaning to attend to that particular matter. However, I have been most terribly occupied with pressing royal duties. You understand. Perhaps, say, next week." Hermes offered a smile, but it was conspicuously devoid of any genuine warmth or amusement. "I regret to inform you that next week will not be a viable option for any parties involved. We are departing forthwith." And this time, there was absolutely no margin for negotiation, no possibility for Sisyphus to employ his customary guile. Hermes, with a simple, decisive gesture, merely touched Sisyphus upon the shoulder, and in that instant, the king found himself instantaneously transported, now standing once again within the somber throne room of Hades, facing a deity whose patience had, quite clearly, diminished considerably since their initial encounter. "Sisyphus," Hades intoned, his voice resonating with the profound gravitas of countless ages. "We are compelled to engage in a rather grave discourse. The throne room of the underworld was, by its very design, a place utterly devoid of any semblance of comfort or cheer. Its colossal walls, hewn from an unyielding black stone, seemed to actively absorb all available light rather than reflect it, plunging the chamber into an eternal twilight. The air hung cool and utterly still, carrying no trace of the vibrant scents or lively sounds from the world of the living above. When Hades spoke, his formidable words seemed to linger in the oppressive atmosphere, their echoes clinging to the darkness far longer than they ought. "You brazenly enchained my colleague Thanatos," Hades continued, his voice steadily gaining in sternness, thereby severely disrupting the natural cosmic order for an egregious period of weeks. "You then, with unparalleled cunning, tricked me into granting you a temporary resurrection, only to subsequently and completely disregard your solemn obligation to return. This extraordinary level of creative deception simply cannot be tolerated any further." Sisyphus, even when confronted with the full, unbridled displeasure of the formidable god of death, maintained his characteristic composure. his expression remarkably unruffled. "I comprehend your profound frustration, my lord. Perhaps we might yet devise some mutually agreeable arrangement." "No," Hades declared, his voice resonating with absolute finality. "There will be no further arrangements, no more protracted negotiations, and most assuredly, no more of your tiresome tricks. You so desperately yearned to circumvent death, did you not? Very well then, you shall receive precisely what you so ardently desired." Crow. And it was at this grim juncture that Sisyphus came to the chilling realization that on occasion, achieving precisely what one desires can, in fact, manifest as the most dreadful possible outcome. Hades, with a single imperious gesture, instantly caused Sisyphus to find himself in a desolate realm unlike any he had ever witnessed, within the vast expanse of the underworld. It was a barren mountainside, relentlessly rocky and utterly devoid of life, its jagged slopes stretching interminably upward into an oppressive, uniform gray sky. At his feet lay a colossal boulder, not gargantuan in scale perhaps, but certainly substantial enough to present an immense and daunting challenge to move. The stone itself was perfectly spherical, its surface worn smooth and polished by the relentless, erosive forces of countless eons of wind and weather. "This will be your eternal abode," Hades declared, his voice resonating with an unyielding finality. "And this is your new, perpetual undertaking. You are destined to propel this immense boulder to the very pinnacle of the formidable mountain. Only upon reaching the highest point may you momentarily cease your arduous toil." Sisyphus cast his gaze upon the colossal stone, then surveyed the imposing height of the mountain, before turning his attention back to the somber deity. "That does not in fact sound unduly burdensome. A measure of physical exertion could prove quite beneficial for my constitution." "Ah, but there remains one crucial particularity," Hades interjected, a smile playing on his lips that was utterly devoid of any genuine warmth or benevolence. "The boulder, you see, is imbued with an arcane enchantment. Each time you draw tantalizingly close to the apex, it will inexorably plummet back down to the base, compelling you to recommence your labor from the very beginning." For the initial instance in his exceptionally protracted and remarkably cunning existence, Sisyphus found himself utterly bereft of speech. His usual quick wit and articulate responses completely abandoned him in the face of such a revelation. "Forevermore," Hades appended, ensuring that the gravity of the pronouncement was unequivocally understood, "whom you ardently desired to circumvent the clutches of death. Congratulations are in order. You shall never perish. Instead, you will perpetually propel this rock up this towering mountain for the entirety of eternity, an unending cycle of fruitless endeavor." And with that definitive statement, Hades dematerialized, leaving Sisyphus in solitary contemplation on the stark mountainside, accompanied only by his formidable boulder and the chilling comprehension of the true essence of ultimate retribution. The weight of his endless fate settled upon him with crushing certainty. On the inaugural day of his infernal assignment, Sisyphus approached the monumental task with his characteristic self-assurance and unwavering resolve. How profoundly arduous could this undertaking genuinely be? He was, after all, a man of exceptional intellect, possessing formidable resourcefulness, and extensively seasoned in the art of unraveling seemingly insurmountable predicaments. He positioned his shoulder firmly against the massive stone and commenced his unyielding exertion. The boulder, while undeniably substantial, did not present an entirely unmanageable burden. The mountain ascended steeply, yet his physical prowess was considerable. With measured steps, inch by painstaking inch, and hour after laborious hour, he steadily advanced along the arduous incline. The immense stone glided with surprising fluidity over the uneven, rocky terrain. His musculature strained with the effort. Rivulets of perspiration streamed down his face. Yet he maintained an unwavering trajectory toward the distant, beckoning summit. As the relentless hours unfolded, Sisyphus found his thoughts drifting, meandering through the labyrinthine corridors of his past existence, contemplating his beloved city of Corinth, envisioning his devoted wife Merope, and reflecting upon the intricate tapestry of ingenious stratagems that had ultimately culminated in his present predicament. The sheer physicality of the labor, surprisingly, offered a peculiar form of solace. It afforded his perpetually active and devising mind a singular, uncomplicated focal point, a welcome respite from its usual intricate machinations. Nearing what he surmised to be the twilight hours, though the very fabric of time seemed to warp and shift within this desolate realm, Sisyphus could discern the summit drawing ever closer, a tangible goal within his grasp. Merely a few more paces, just a modicum more of concentrated effort. His legs ached with an insistent throb. His back protested with a persistent soreness. Yet the sweet taste of impending triumph was within tantalizing reach. He mustered his remaining strength, delivering the boulder one final Herculean shove, and watched as it slowly, deliberately, rolled over the mountain's crest, seemingly signifying the completion of his monumental endeavor. For a fleeting instant, Sisyphus stood at the pinnacle, his breath ragged and labored, yet imbued with an undeniable sense of victory. He had accomplished the seemingly impossible. Even amidst the despair of eternal damnation, he had ingeniously discovered a pathway to success. He was, unequivocally, still more sagacious than the gods had ever deigned to acknowledge. Then, with a chilling inevitability, the colossal boulder commenced its inexorable descent down the opposing face of the mountain. Initially, a desperate flicker of hope ignited within him. He believed he could intercept it. He frantically sprinted after the plummeting stone, extending his arms in a futile attempt to seize it, to arrest its accelerating plunge. But the boulder gained momentum with terrifying rapidity, bouncing and tumbling uncontrollably down the jagged, rocky slope, utterly impervious to his desperate efforts. Sisyphus could only watch in horrified disbelief as the entirety of his day's arduous labor dissolved into nothingness within a mere handful of minutes. The colossal stone rolled relentlessly, all the way to the very base of the mountain, coming to an ominous halt in the exact, precise location where his grueling ordeal had commenced that very morning. And it was then that the profound, horrifying truth dawned upon him. This was not merely a generalized retribution for his myriad deceptions and intricate schemes. This was a punishment meticulously calibrated and specifically engineered for an individual of his unique psychological makeup. For someone who derived immense gratification from dissecting and resolving complex challenges, from unearthing ingenious solutions, from emerging victorious in contests that others deemed utterly unwinnable, the true insidious cruelty resided not in the sheer physical drudgery, but in the insidious, ever-present flicker of hope. Each day, he would meticulously propel the boulder up the arduous mountain. Each day, he would register tangible progress, experiencing the profound satisfaction of advancing toward his elusive objective. Each day, he would momentarily attain the summit and savor a fleeting instant of hard-won triumph. And, with an agonizing predictability, each day he would be compelled to witness that hard-earned triumph dissolve into utter futility as the relentless stone rolled back down to the abyss. As Sisyphus slowly and deliberately retraced his steps down the formidable mountain to commence his Sisyphean task anew, a chilling realization solidified within his astute mind. The gods had, with malevolent brilliance, fashioned the consummate punishment for a man who harbored the audacious belief that he could outmaneuver fate itself. They had bestowed upon him precisely what he had perpetually yearned for: an unending challenge, an interminable game to engage in. The singular, agonizing flaw was that this was a game he was intrinsically, eternally destined never, ever to win. The ultimate irony, a perpetual torment of unfulfilled ambition. However, there resides an intriguing facet concerning Sisyphus himself, an element that the Olympian deities perhaps did not entirely factor into their meticulous design of his eternal torment. He was, fundamentally, an individual who cultivated immense pride in his unyielding persistence, in his unwavering commitment to persevere even when confronted with the most overwhelming and insurmountable odds. And as he once more positioned his shoulder against the monumental boulder for the second time, there was a subtle, yet discernible nuance in his resolute expression that strongly intimated he was not yet completely vanquished. After all, eternity stretches for an unimaginably vast expanse of time, and a man possessing sufficient cunning to have once ensnared death itself might, eventually, unearth some latent gratification, some secluded personal triumph, even within the confines of the most perfectly conceived and inescapable divine punishment the gods could ever possibly devise. His spirit, though burdened, remained unbroken. While Sisyphus endures his perpetual existence, relentlessly propelling a colossal boulder up an unyielding mountain, the rhythms of life within Corinth persist unabated in his absence. Yet the very fabric of the city he left behind bears the indelible imprints of his distinctive and often perplexing reign, manifest in ways both overtly conspicuous and subtly pervasive. The legacy of his cleverness, his audacious disregard for convention, and his penchant for intricate schemes continues to shape the Corinthian ethos. Imagine, if you will, traversing the bustling thoroughfares of Corinth on a quintessential morning, perhaps a full year subsequent to Sisyphus's definitive and final disappearance from the mortal realm. The city, far from succumbing to chaos, has not merely continued its daily functions, but, arguably, operates with an enhanced degree of efficiency and streamlined precision. Nevertheless, an intangible quality permeates the very air, an elusive characteristic that unmistakably distinguishes Corinth from its Hellenic counterparts. It is a subtle hum of ingenuity, a pervasive undercurrent of resourceful thinking that sets it apart. Your day's journey might commence at the Agora, the vibrant marketplace that serves as the pulsating heart of this thriving metropolis. The merchants who ply their trades here possess a singular reputation that echoes throughout the entirety of Greece. They are renowned for their extraordinarily astute negotiating prowess, for their uncanny ability to conceive of innovative solutions to vexing commercial dilemmas that utterly baffle traders from other cities, and for exhibiting an almost preternatural knack for transmogrifying any perceived disadvantage into a lucrative opportunity. Their salesmanship is a masterclass in persuasive rhetoric and creative problem-solving. Consider, for instance, Marcus, the esteemed pottery merchant. He is currently engaged in an elaborate discourse with a discerning customer hailing from Athens, meticulously expounding upon why his collection of vases, each bearing a minor hairline crack, possesses an inherently greater intrinsic value than their perfectly pristine counterparts. His argument, a testament to Corinthian ingenuity, is both unexpected and compelling. "You observe," Marcus articulates, his finger tracing the delicate fissure with an air of profound connoisseurship. This precise line is not merely a blemish. It serves as irrefutable evidence of the clay's arduous odyssey through the crucible of the kiln's intense inferno. It stands as incontrovertible proof that this particular vessel has been rigorously tested and, crucially, has emerged demonstrably robust and resilient. A pot devoid of such marks, conversely, has yet to truly undergo its definitive trial by fire. The Athenian customer, initially harboring a palpable skepticism, finds himself, by the conclusion of this captivating exchange, not only willingly tendering an inflated sum for the flawed pottery, but also expressing genuine gratitude to Marcus for what he perceives as an invaluable lesson in aesthetics and resilience. This, in its purest form, encapsulates the quintessential Corinthian salesmanship, the remarkable capacity to artfully reframe any perceived imperfection as a desirable attribute, to deftly transform any obstacle into a fertile ground for advantage. It is a highly refined skill that the city's merchants assiduously cultivated through years of observing the ingenious stratagems of their former monarch. Sisyphus possessed an unparalleled gift for compelling individuals to perceive situations from entirely novel and unexpected perspectives, and that extraordinary aptitude seamlessly permeated and became an integral component of the city's enduring cultural fabric. As you continue your exploration through the bustling market, another distinctly Corinthian characteristic comes into sharp focus: the singularly creative manner in which the populace confronts and resolves practical challenges. When, for instance, the local baker's oven unexpectedly malfunctions, instead of merely summoning a conventional repairman, he resourcefully devises an intricate system, utilizing an array of strategically positioned mirrors and the focused intensity of sunlight to ingeniously continue the vital process of baking bread. Similarly, when a cargo ship laden with goods of extraordinary weight arrives, proving too cumbersome for the standard dockside cranes, the resourceful dock workers collectively conceive of an innovative pulley system, cleverly repurposing the ship's own towering masts. These unconventional solutions are not invariably superior to more traditional approaches. Indeed, they are occasionally more convoluted in their execution. Yet, they are invariably products of profound creativity, born from a deeply ingrained cultural ethos that learned to circumvent obstacles through inventive circumvention rather than through brute force confrontation. Within the opulent confines of the royal palace, Queen Merope has gracefully assumed the day-to-day governance of Corinth. She has unequivocally proven herself to be an exceptionally capable ruler in her own right, although her administrative methodology is considerably more direct and transparent than that of her famously wily husband. When, for example, she engages in the intricate negotiations of trade agreements, she consistently adheres to the precise stipulations articulated within the contracts. A stark departure from her predecessor, this forthright approach has necessitated a notable adjustment for Corinth's established trading partners, who had grown accustomed to Sisyphus's notoriously flexible and often self-serving interpretations of written accords. Several discerning merchants from neighboring cities have expressed pleasant surprise upon discovering that when Queen Mara pledges to deliver a specific quantity, such as 100 amphoras of premium olive oil, she unfailingly delivers precisely 100 amphoras, rather than, say, 97 amphoras, accompanied by an elaborate and convoluted explanation detailing how the missing 3 amphoras are, in fact, equivalent to the full 100, when one accounts for the demonstrably superior quality and unparalleled potency of the delivered oil. Nevertheless, not every aspect of Sisyphus's pervasive influence has entirely dissipated into the annals of history. The city's younger generation, for instance, is diligently raised on a rich tapestry of narratives recounting the adventurous exploits of their former sovereign. However, these are not the archetypal tales of conventional heroic valor. Instead, they are captivating chronicles centered on the virtues of ingenious cleverness, on the art of discovering unforeseen solutions, and on the paramount importance of strategic foresight, the ability to perpetually think several steps ahead. Should you visit the esteemed school where young Corinthians are initiated into the mysteries of letters and numbers, you might overhear the venerable teacher recounting the legendary tale of how Sisyphus ingeniously persuaded a rival king to exchange his finest, most prized horses for a mere herd of mules. His persuasive argument hinged on the cunning demonstration that mules, by virtue of their partial donkey lineage, were unequivocally more intelligent than horses, and consequently possessed a superior intrinsic value. The children are utterly captivated by these engaging stories, not because they endorse duplicity, but because they ardently celebrate the virtues of intellectual prowess and unbridled creativity. They are thus instilled with the profound understanding that there frequently exists more than one viable pathway to resolving a problem, and that the most ostensibly obvious solution is not invariably the most efficacious. This deeply ingrained cultural emphasis on intellectual agility and strategic cleverness yields tangible and significant practical advantages. Corinthian engineers, for example, are universally lauded throughout the entirety of Greece for their groundbreaking and highly innovative construction methodologies. The city's magnificent harbor, which Sisyphus himself oversaw and expanded during his reign, ingeniously employs a sophisticated system of redirected oceanic currents that meticulously maintains the water at a sufficient depth for even the largest seafaring vessels, thereby obviating the constant and costly necessity for dredging. This ingenious solution utterly perplexed engineers from rival cities until they undertook a painstaking and detailed study of its intricate design. The Corinthian military, too, exhibits unmistakable hallmarks of Sisyphus's enduring influence. Rather than relying solely on brute physical strength and unwavering courage, Corinthian soldiers undergo rigorous training designed to cultivate acute tactical thinking. They are assiduously instructed to exploit the natural terrain to their advantage, to meticulously identify and target their adversaries' inherent weaknesses, and to secure victories through superior strategy and cunning maneuver, rather than through mere overwhelming force. A visiting Spartan general, renowned for his martial prowess, once remarked with a grudging yet undeniable respect that engaging in combat with Corinthians was akin to participating in a complex game of chess against an opponent who perpetually and unpredictably altered the fundamental rules of engagement. Not through outright cheating, precisely, but rather by ingeniously discovering novel interpretations of the established rules that no other player had ever previously contemplated. A particularly fascinating characteristic of post-Sisyphus Corinth lies in the distinctive manner its populace engages with figures of authority. Having been governed by a monarch renowned for his consistent ability to outwit even the gods themselves, the Corinthians have cultivated a profound and healthy skepticism towards any individual who purports to possess absolute truths or definitive answers. When, for instance, a traveling philosopher arrives in the bustling city, proclaiming an ultimate understanding of the fundamental nature of reality, the Corinthians extend a polite reception. They listen attentively, yet subsequently pose a series of incisive, meticulously detailed questions that, with courteous persistence, gradually expose the inherent lacunae and inconsistencies within the philosopher's proclaimed wisdom. This practice is not born of malice or desire to humiliate. Rather, it stems from a genuine and deep-seated intellectual curiosity regarding novel concepts. However, generations of experience have instilled in them the imperative to never accept any assertion without first subjecting it to rigorous and thorough scrutiny. This ingrained intellectual autonomy has, over time, transformed Corinth into a veritable magnet for profound thinkers and pioneering innovators hailing from every corner of the vast Mediterranean world. Scholars universally acknowledge that if their groundbreaking theories can withstand the analytical scrutiny and critical engagement of a Corinthian audience, then those ideas are robust enough to be successfully presented anywhere, precisely because Corinthian audiences are celebrated for asking the most probing and insightful questions. The sacred edifices of the city, its venerable temples, also bear the unmistakable imprint of Sisyphus's enduring influence. While many other Greek city-states might erect temples primarily to overwhelm the divine with sheer architectural grandeur and opulent scale, Corinthian temples are meticulously conceived and engineered with an emphasis on ingenuity and subtle cleverness. The majestic temple dedicated to Apollo, for example, is masterfully aligned such that the first rays of the morning sun strike directly upon the statue of the god, creating a breathtaking optical illusion where the deity appears to radiate with an ethereal, divine luminosity. Similarly, the Temple of Aphrodite employs acoustical principles with such extraordinary skill that even the softest whispered supplication at one end of the expansive chamber can be distinctly heard at the sacred altar, imbuing worshippers with the profound and deeply personal impression that the goddess herself is intimately attending to their every heartfelt request. These ingenious designs are not conceived as attempts to dupe or mislead the gods. The devout Greeks were far too pious for such sacrilege. Instead, they represent sophisticated expressions of human creativity and profound reverence, innovative methods of rendering the religious experience not only more deeply meaningful, but also extraordinarily memorable for the faithful. As the golden hues of twilight surrender to the deepening shadows of evening across Corinth, one might readily discover oneself nestled within the convivial atmosphere of one of the city's many bustling taverns, passively absorbing the vibrant tapestry of conversations unfolding around. The subjects of discussion are, predictably, much the same as in any other Greek city. the machinations of politics, the intricacies of trade, the bonds of family, and the latest currents of local gossip. Yet there exists a discernibly distinct quality to the way Corinthians engage with and dissect these familiar topics. When an individual presents a personal quandary or a complex dilemma, the immediate response from their peers is rarely one of effusive sympathy or unsolicited advice. Instead, it is invariably a volley of incisive questions. Inquiries might range from, "Have you genuinely considered approaching this predicament from an entirely different direction?" to "What if the core issue isn't precisely what you initially perceive it to be?" Or even, "What unforeseen consequences or benefits might arise if you were to undertake the precise opposite of what everyone else anticipates?" This particular conversational style should not be misconstrued as a display of cold, detached intellectualism. On the contrary, Corinthians harbor a deep and genuine affection for their friends and fellow citizens, but they have assimilated a crucial lesson from the legacy of their former king, that the most effective way to truly assist someone is often to facilitate a fundamental shift in their perspective regarding their situation. Thus, a young merchant, perhaps consumed by anxiety over burgeoning competition from a rival trader, might depart a Corinthian tavern not with a specific piece of counsel, but with an entirely novel and transformative understanding of his own commercial enterprise. This epiphany would not be the product of direct guidance, but rather the cumulative effect of having been guided by precisely the right questions, which illuminated opportunities and pathways he had previously overlooked. As one makes their way homeward through the hushed streets, passing by dwellings where families are gradually settling in for the tranquility of the night, a moment of profound reflection might arise concerning the implications of inhabiting a city so profoundly shaped by the indelible spirit of a figure like Sisyphus. It is crucial to clarify that this does not imply that every resident of Corinth is inherently a trickster or a cunning schemer. Indeed, the vast majority of its citizens are honest, diligently hard-working, and remarkably straightforward in their daily dealings. However, each individual has been undeniably touched by the pervasive understanding that intelligence and creativity are not merely traits, but rather virtues eminently worthy of diligent cultivation. They have internalized the wisdom that complex problems frequently admit of multiple, often unconventional, solutions. That authority, while deserving of respect, should nonetheless be subjected to persistent and thoughtful questioning, and that the singular capacity to think divergently represents one of humanity's most invaluable and potent gifts. In a curious and unexpected twist of fate, Sisyphus did, in fact, attain a unique form of immortality, not through his audacious attempts to defy death itself, but rather through the enduring and transformative influence he exerted upon the people he once governed. Every instance where a Corinthian merchant devises an ingenious and creative solution to a complex business challenge, every occasion when a Corinthian engineer conceptualizes and brings to fruition an innovatively designed structure, and every time a Corinthian citizen articulates a penetrating question that cuts directly to the very core of an intricate issue, in each of these moments, an essence of Sisyphus irrevocably lives on. Perhaps this constitutes a far more profound and meaningful form of eternal life than he could ever have possibly envisioned for himself. It is not an endless personal existence, but rather the perpetuation of potent ideas and fundamental values that collectively render the world a more dynamic, intriguing, and intellectually stimulating place. The compelling narrative of Sisyphus transcends the mere account of a single clever king and his perpetual struggle with a boulder. Its true significance lies in its exploration of something far more expansive and profound, the delicate and often precarious equilibrium of power that exists between mortals and the divine, and the far-reaching consequences that ensue when an individual resolutely refuses to acquiesce to their preordained position within that cosmic balance. One might vividly envision the grand, august council chamber nestled atop Mount Olympus. Several days following Sisyphus's consignment to his unending, arduous task, the pantheon of gods convenes for one of their customary assemblies, during which they deliberated upon the myriad affairs of mortals and the meticulous administration of the expansive cosmos. Yet, on this particular occasion, the discourse persistently reverts to the extraordinary case of the defiant Corinthian king. Zeus, the venerable king of the gods, occupies his magnificent throne, his countenance etched with a contemplative and weighty expression. Surrounding him, his esteemed fellow deities engage in an animated debate concerning the extensive implications of the unprecedented events they have recently witnessed. This is because Sisyphus, it is understood, has inadvertently provoked inquiries that extend far beyond the straightforward confines of mere transgression and punitive retribution. The crux of the matter, articulates Athena, the sagacious goddess of wisdom, her voice resonating with clarity, is not simply that he managed to shackle Thanatos or cunningly deceive Hades. The true problem resides in the undeniable fact that he succeeded. For a duration of several months, he actually managed to fundamentally disrupt the established order of existence itself. Apollo, the radiant god of music and prophecy, offers a solemn nod in agreement. Mortals in distant cities are already recounting tales of Sisyphus, he observes, and some of these narratives, alarmingly, convey a tone that borders on admiration. This, then, represents the veritable core of the issue with which the Olympian deities are wrestling. Their concern is not solely about meting out punishment to a single individual for his transgressions. It is, more fundamentally, about preserving the intricate, overarching system that ensures the harmonious functioning of the entire universe. If mortals begin to entertain the dangerous notion that they can successfully challenge and subvert divine authority, the very fabric of cosmic order stands to unravel. Hades, still harboring a palpable sense of mortification from having been outwitted by a mere mortal, interjects with a stern declaration. The punishment I have meticulously devised, he asserts, should serve as an unequivocal deterrent. Every human who hears this cautionary tale will assuredly comprehend that mere cleverness alone is utterly insufficient to vanquish the omnipotent gods. But will they truly? Hermes, the agile messenger of the gods, queries, his tone laced with a probing skepticism. Sisyphus did not meet his downfall because his intellect proved inadequate. He failed because we ultimately opted to deploy overwhelming, unassailable force to subdue him. That, my esteemed colleagues, is a fundamentally different proposition. And indeed, this subtle yet crucial distinction holds immense significance. The gods did not achieve victory over Sisyphus through a superior battle of wits. They neither outmaneuvered him intellectually, nor ensnared him within the intricacies of his own elaborate traps. Instead, they simply invoked their inherent and immense divine power to override his mortal ingenuity. This particular method of victory, rather than reinforcing divine intellectual superiority, inadvertently conveyed a message profoundly different from their original intent. To fully grasp the profound implications of this, it is essential to consider the actual operational dynamics of ancient Greek society. The intricate relationship between mortals and gods was never akin to the stark, absolute dynamic between slaves and their masters. Instead, it bore a closer resemblance to the complex interplay between citizens and their governing body, a relationship often intricate, occasionally adversarial, yet consistently governed by a set of mutually understood, if unwritten, rules. Mortals were expected to venerate the gods, diligently perform the requisite rituals, and humbly accept their predetermined fate. In reciprocity, the gods were generally expected to act with reasonable fairness, to bestow rewards upon virtue, and to diligently uphold the cosmic order. Whenever either party transgressed these established expectations, significant disruptions and problems invariably arose. Sisyphus, for his part, had violated his side of the celestial compact in the most spectacular and audacious fashion imaginable. Yet, his brazen transgressions inadvertently brought to light something profoundly uncomfortable about the gods' own side of the equation. He had achieved success in his intricate schemes, not through any inherent supernatural capabilities of his own, but rather through a meticulous and discerning observation of how the divine system actually functioned, followed by a clever exploitation of its inherent weaknesses. When he managed to chain Thanatos, he accomplished this by skillfully appealing to the god of death's professional pride and his insatiable curiosity. When he subsequently tricked Hades into permitting his return to the realm of the living, he deftly exploited the bureaucratic intricacies of the underworld and the god's unwavering respect for the proper observance of funeral rites. These were not mystical solutions wrought by magic. Rather, they represented a sophisticated form of social engineering applied on a truly cosmic scale. Back within the bustling mortal realm, philosophers and astute politicians were beginning to earnestly discuss the far-reaching implications of Sisyphus's actions. In the intellectual hub of Athens, a burgeoning young philosopher named Democritus was actively formulating groundbreaking ideas concerning the fundamental nature of reality, concepts that undeniably owed a debt to Sisyphus's audacious example. If a mere mortal could comprehend divine systems with sufficient acumen to manipulate them, what profound revelations did that imply about the intrinsic nature of those very systems? Concurrently, in the militaristic city-state of Sparta, shrewd military strategists were diligently studying Sisyphus's ingenious methods. They pondered how he managed to identify vulnerabilities in what appeared to be flawlessly designed systems, and how he maintained his remarkable composure and strategic clarity even when confronted with overwhelming divine wrath. These were, they recognized, invaluable skills that possessed potent applications even within purely mortal conflicts. The tale of Sisyphus was rapidly disseminating throughout the entire Greek world, but as it spread, it also evolved, adapting to the diverse cultural and philosophical landscapes it traversed. Some versions of the story placed a heavy emphasis on Sisyphus's egregious hubris and his eventual harrowing punishment, thereby serving as a stark cautionary fable about the perils inherent in challenging the omnipotent gods. Other renditions, however, chose to highlight his exceptional cleverness and indomitable persistence, elevating him to the stature of an almost heroic figure. In the rendition widely recounted in democratic Athens, Sisyphus was transformed into a potent symbol of intellectual liberation, a man who steadfastly refused to accept that any form of authority, even that of the divine, lay beyond the legitimate scope of human inquiry and questioning. Athenian storytellers particularly underscored his meticulous reasoning, his systematic approach to confronting complex problems, and his unwavering willingness to face the full consequences of his bold actions. In the more conservative and rigidly structured society of Sparta, however, the narrative was articulated quite differently. Here, Sisyphus served as a potent allegory for the inherent dangers of excessive individualism. Spartan versions of the epic tale accentuated how his self-serving desire to evade death had catastrophically disrupted the natural order of the cosmos, and, in doing so, inflicted suffering upon countless others. The moral woven into their retelling was a pointed lesson about the paramount importance of accepting one's designated role within the larger, cohesive community. Among the more compelling renditions of this enduring narrative are those recounted in the smaller urban centers spread across Greece, particularly in locales such as Corinth itself, where the populace experiences the direct governance of monarchical rulers and despots. Within these localized accounts, the figure of Sisyphus assumes a far more intricate dimension, serving not merely as a character, but as a profound cautionary allegory regarding the intrinsic limitations inherent even in the most astute and ingenious forms of resistance against established authority. The storytellers in these regions refrain from depicting Sisyphus as an unequivocal hero or an unadulterated villain. Instead, they portray him as an exceptionally brilliant individual who grasped a fundamental truth about the very essence of power: that all intricate systems, irrespective of their perceived immensity or apparent perfection, invariably harbor inherent vulnerabilities that can be meticulously exploited by an observer possessing sufficient keenness and attentiveness. However, these narratives simultaneously underscore the ultimate constraints of such an approach. While intellectual ingenuity can indeed exploit systemic frailties, it remains incapable of fundamentally altering the foundational distribution of power. Sisyphus, for instance, possessed the cunning to manipulate the elaborate celestial bureaucracy of the gods, yet he could not elevate himself to godhood. He could successfully postpone his predetermined fate, but he was ultimately powerless to evade it entirely. This particular interpretation of the myth deeply resonates with individuals who find themselves living under political regimes that they cannot directly or openly challenge. They keenly comprehend the alluring appeal of discovering subtle stratagems to circumvent oppressive authority, but they also possess an acute understanding of the critical importance of discerning when such endeavors reach their insurmountable limits. Simultaneously, within the celestial realms of Mount Olympus, the divine pantheon was arriving at analogous conclusions. The audacious case of Sisyphus had compelled them to engage in a more scrupulous introspection concerning the manner in which they wielded their formidable authority. They acutely recognized that the perception of foolishness or incompetence among mortals was nearly as perilous to their standing as an overt display of weakness. A heightened degree of circumspection is imperative for us, Zeus authoritatively declared. This necessity arises not because mortal beings present a tangible existential threat to our dominion, but rather because the very foundation of our authority is, in part, predicated upon their unwavering respect. Should they ever cease to hold our competence in high esteem, they might then begin to transgress boundaries that we are unwilling to see challenged. This consequential realization subsequently precipitated what could aptly be described as a series of strategic administrative reforms within the divine government. The gods initiated a more rigorous scrutiny of the systemic vulnerabilities that Sisyphus had so cunningly exploited. Consequently, existing procedures underwent a comprehensive tightening. Spheres of responsibility were meticulously clarified, and robust checks and balances were diligently implemented to preempt any future attempts at bureaucratic manipulation. Yet, they also enacted a more subtle, albeit profound, transformation. They began to place a renewed emphasis on cultivating and rewarding distinct virtues in their interactions with the mortal realm. Moving beyond the mere demand for unthinking obedience and reverential awe, they commenced actively valorizing intelligence and innovation. Provided these commendable qualities were channeled towards constructive rather than subversive objectives, the renowned hero Odysseus, for example, experienced a significant surge in divine favor during this transformative epoch. Much like Sisyphus, Odysseus was celebrated for his exceptional cleverness and his innate capacity to devise ingenious solutions to seemingly insurmountable predicaments. However, in stark contrast to Sisyphus, Odysseus judiciously employed these formidable abilities in service of objectives that consistently garnered the gods' unequivocal approval: his arduous journey homeward to his devoted family, the valiant defense of his cherished kingdom, and the meticulous preservation of societal order. This pivotal shift in divine policy represented a sophisticated form of strategic compromise. The gods, in their wisdom, acknowledged that both intelligence and creativity constituted admirable and intrinsically valuable human attributes that ought not to be suppressed. Nevertheless, they simultaneously articulated with unambiguous clarity that these very qualities must be exercised with profound responsibility, strictly adhering to the immutable parameters of the cosmic order. As the centuries progressed, the captivating narrative of Sisyphus transcended its mythological origins, evolving into a seminal reference point for profound intellectual discourse concerning the intricate dynamics of power, the complexities of resistance, and the inherent limitations of both. When a tyrannical ruler became excessively oppressive, it was not uncommon for people to observe that he was compelling his subjects to become like Sisyphus, implying that he was driving them towards desperate and ultimately self-defeating acts of defiance. Conversely, when a zealous rebel or an ambitious revolutionary began to harbor an inflated estimation of their prospects for success, their sagacious companions might forewarn them not to roll the boulder, a poignant idiom that came to signify the pursuit of a fruitless and ultimately self-destructive struggle. Yet the story also furnished a rich lexicon for articulating legitimate forms of resistance against entrenched authority. When an individual astutely identified inherent flaws within a prevailing system or ingeniously discovered creative stratagems to circumvent unjust regulations, they might be extolled for their Sisyphean insight, a remarkable faculty to perceive beyond the superficial permanence of formidable power structures and discern the underlying vulnerabilities beneath. In this profound manner, Sisyphus evolved beyond merely being a character confined to a cautionary fable. He transmuted into a potent symbol embodying the eternal tension that invariably exists between the forces of authority and the spirit of intelligence, between the brute force of power and the nuanced depth of wisdom, and indeed, between the passive acceptance of the world as it is and the audacious imagination of how it might be fundamentally different. And perhaps it is precisely for these reasons that his compelling narrative continues to resonate with such profound relevance across millennia. All of humanity exists within pervasive systems of power that, at times, appear overwhelmingly immutable and permanent. We all invariably confront moments when we are compelled to decide whether to acquiesce to imposed limitations or to boldly test their boundaries. We all ponder whether sheer cleverness and unyielding persistence can ultimately surmount seemingly impossible odds. The narrative of Sisyphus, in its profound ambiguity, suggests that the answer is simultaneously both yes and no. Yes, intelligence and creative ingenuity are capable of achieving truly remarkable feats, of exposing latent weaknesses within even the most formidable systems, and of securing victories that initially appear utterly unattainable. But no, these hard-won victories may not possess an enduring permanence, and the ultimate cost incurred in their achievement may, in the final analysis, tragically outweigh their ephemeral benefits. While Sisyphus relentlessly toils, perpetually pushing his eternal boulder, let us momentarily divert our attention to meticulously explore the vast and intrinsically complex realm where his relentless punishment unfolds. For the underworld, one must understand, is far more than merely a desolate destination for departed souls. It represents an intricate civilization in its own right, replete with its distinct culture, its internal politics, and its methodical daily routines. Envision yourself traversing the meticulously organized administrative districts of Hades. This is not the fiery, torment-laden abyss one might instinctively anticipate, but rather an expanse that bears a striking resemblance to the governmental quarter of a sprawling metropolis. Here, edifices constructed from smooth, obsidian-hued stone rise majestically, and their extensive corridors are meticulously lined with countless filing cabinets that ascend beyond the limits of human vision. The air is filled with the ceaseless, rhythmic scratching of scribes diligently inscribing upon endless parchment scrolls with their styluses. The underworld, you see, is tasked with the monumental responsibility of processing every single soul that departs from life anywhere across the entire world. This constitutes an utterly staggering volume of administrative work. Each individual soul necessitates a thorough evaluation, a just judgment, and a precise assignment to its appropriate designated section within the afterlife. It is an operation of immense complexity, demanding meticulous organization and an unwavering attention to the most minute details. At the very heart of this intricate system reside the three revered judges of the dead, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iacchus. These eminent figures were, in their mortal lives, powerful kings, selected for their unparalleled wisdom and unimpeachable fairness to serve eternally as arbiters of the deceased. They dedicate their days and their nights, though the passage of time is perceived with profound difference within the underworld, to assiduously reviewing countless cases and rendering momentous decisions regarding the eternal dwelling place of each soul. Were one afforded the rare opportunity to observe one of their daily case review meetings, one would undoubtedly be astonished by the rigorous methodology and profound thoughtfulness that characterize the entire process. Each judge, it is understood, possesses specialized expertise in distinct categories of cases. Minos, with his keen intellect, handles the intricate ethical dilemmas, presiding over the souls whose earthly existences were fraught with difficult moral choices. Rhadamanthus, renowned for his unwavering sense of justice, deals with cases pertaining to legal disputes and matters of jurisprudence. Iacchus, the most pragmatic of the trio, manages the more straightforward and less convoluted assessments. Today, their esteemed panel is meticulously reviewing the comprehensive file of a merchant hailing from Rhodes, who tragically passed away just last week. The man, by most accounts, conducted his business dealings with general honesty, exhibited profound devotion to his cherished family, and contributed with notable generosity to his local temple. However, it was also revealed that he amassed a substantial portion of his fortune through the controversial practice of supplying weaponry to both warring factions during a localized conflict, an action that undeniably prolonged a devastating war and consequently inflicted considerable suffering upon countless individuals. That the underlying intention holds significant weight, Rhadamanthus contended, his voice resonating with a judicial tone. He was not actively striving to prolong the conflict. His actions were merely a reflection of conducting his legitimate commercial enterprises. However, the resultant effect remained precisely the same, Minos countered, his argument cutting through the air with logical precision. He undeniably profited from widespread suffering, irrespective of his personal intentions. Iacchus, whose reputation as the most practical and grounded of the three judges was well established, directed their attention to a specific section within the merchant's meticulously compiled file. Consider, if you will, the disposition of his profits. He financed the construction of 3 schools and provided crucial funding for medical care, specifically for war orphans. He effectively utilized wealth acquired from conflict to actively ameliorate its devastating consequences. Following a thorough deliberation that spanned an entire hour, the esteemed judges ultimately reached a conclusive decision. The merchant would be consigned to spend a period within the middle regions of the underworld, a state that was neither an outright punishment nor an immediate admittance into the serene Elysian fields. There, he would be afforded ample opportunities to atone for the moral debt accrued from his war profiteering through dedicated service to other souls. This nuanced and intricate form of judgment is, in fact, highly characteristic of the actual operational modus operandi of the underworld. Despite the pervasive popular narratives concerning eternal and vindictive torment, the vast majority of souls receive punishments that are more akin to structured rehabilitation programs. The overarching objective is not vengeful retribution or gratuitous cruelty, but rather the meticulous restoration of cosmic balance. Naturally, there exist certain stark exceptions to this general rule. A select few souls are indeed condemned to truly eternal punishments, yet these are stringently reserved for the most extreme and egregious cases. These are individuals who perpetrated crimes so fundamentally disruptive that they fundamentally destabilized the very basic order of existence. Individuals like, well, Sisyphus himself. Other infamous denizens of eternal torment include Tantalus, who committed the unspeakable act of murdering his own son and serving him as a macabre feast to the gods, and Ixion, who audaciously attempted to seduce Zeus's divine consort. These transgressions were far from ordinary crimes. They represented profound violations of the most foundational principles that meticulously bind reality together. Yet, for every singular soul enduring an eternal punishment, there exist thousands more diligently working through more temporary consequences for their more commonplace failings. The underworld boasts vast, purpose-built workshops where souls are afforded the opportunity to acquire skills they tragically never mastered during their mortal lives. There are also specialized counseling centers where individuals painstakingly work through the psychological damage they inflicted upon others. Furthermore, serene meditation gardens offer a tranquil environment where souls can cultivate the virtues of patience and humility. Should one traverse these various areas, one would discover them to be surprisingly normal in their daily activities. Former warriors, for instance, can be observed learning the intricate art of weaving, a task designed to impart patience and refine their fine motor control. Former tyrants, once accustomed to absolute command, are seen collaborating in teams, thereby learning the invaluable principles of cooperation. And former misers, who once clung tightly to their possessions, are now learning the profound joy of giving freely by actively assisting newly arrived souls in adjusting to their unfamiliar circumstances. The overseers of these intricate programs are not malevolent entities or monstrous figures. Rather, they are enlightened souls who have successfully navigated their own paths of rehabilitation and, by their own volition, have chosen to remain within the underworld's complex architecture to guide and uplift others. Many among them attest that this profound work offers a sense of purpose, far surpassing any endeavor they undertook during their fleeting mortal existences. One notable supervisor, a former pirate captain named Thronon, dedicated 3 decades within the underworld's educational workshops, meticulously mastering the disciplines of mathematics, engineering, and architecture. Today, he presides over a transformative curriculum that instructs newly arrived souls not merely in the construction of physical edifices, but in the more abstract yet equally vital art of forging robust communities, nurturing meaningful relationships, and cultivating unwavering trust. The living often mistakenly perceive death as the ultimate cessation. Thronon elucidates with a seasoned gravitas to a diverse assembly of recent arrivals, his voice echoing with the wisdom gleaned from countless journeys. Yet, it is more accurately likened to a momentous graduation. You have successfully completed the fundamental curriculum of earthly existence. Now, the truly advanced and profound work commences. His current cohort comprises a fascinating tapestry of souls drawn from disparate corners of the ancient world. Among them is a formidable Celtic chieftain whose journey of self-discovery requires him to grasp that brute strength is not invariably the most efficacious solution to life's multifarious challenges. There is also an Egyptian scribe whose intellectual prowess with numerical systems was undeniably brilliant, yet whose interpersonal skills were, regrettably, sorely lacking. Completing this trio is a Persian merchant, renowned for his boundless generosity towards his immediate family, but whose dealings with business competitors were marked by an unyielding ruthlessness. These disparate individuals collaborate on multifaceted projects, each task meticulously designed to leverage their inherent strengths while simultaneously compelling them to confront and ameliorate their inherent weaknesses. The Celtic chieftain, for instance, embarks on the arduous but rewarding process of actively listening to and valuing the perspectives of his peers. The Egyptian scribe progressively learns to articulate complex quantitative concepts in a manner accessible and comprehensible to all, irrespective of their prior intellectual background. The Persian merchant, in turn, begins to cultivate a genuine empathy and concern for the well-being of individuals he does not personally know, extending beyond the confines of his familial affections. It is an undeniably gradual process, yet it is far from unpleasant. Indeed, there resides a profound satisfaction in acquiring novel skills, in achieving a deeper, more nuanced self-understanding, and in the slow, deliberate metamorphosis into the person one always harbored the innate potential to become. A potential that often remained tantalizingly unfulfilled during the constraints of mortal life. Naturally, not every soul residing within the underworld is engaged in a rehabilitation program. Those who led lives characterized by unwavering virtue and moral rectitude proceed directly to the Elysian fields, idyllic and tranquil meadows where they are free to spend eternity precisely as they choose. Many of these blessed souls elect to perpetually continue their journey of learning and personal growth, albeit without the rigorously structured programs mandated for those souls who still have considerable inner work to undertake. And then there are the souls who consciously opt for reincarnation. After dedicating a period of time within the underworld, assimilating the lessons they needed to absorb, some souls ultimately decide that they wish to re-experience mortal life. They approach the serene river Lethe, whose waters possess the power to erase all memories of their past existences, and are subsequently reborn into new lives, replete with fresh opportunities and unburdened by past recollections. This multifaceted system engenders a captivating dynamic within the underworld's sprawling domains. Certain regions exude an air of permanence and serene settlement, inhabited by souls who have discovered their eternal abode and are content in their perpetual dwelling. Other areas, by contrast, possess a more transient, school-like ambiance, characterized by a constantly fluctuating population of souls diligently working towards their subsequent destination. The permanent residents frequently become deeply involved in the intricate administration of the realm. They serve with dedication as counselors, sagacious teachers, knowledgeable guides, and meticulous clerks within the vast and complex bureaucracy that ensures the smooth operation of every aspect of this cosmic domain. Many of them discover profound fulfillment in this service. They perceive themselves as contributing meaningfully to something far grander than their individual selves, actively participating in the maintenance of the intricate cosmic order that governs all existence across the multiverse. However, even within this meticulously organized system, persistent challenges and spirited debates inevitably arise. The venerable judges regularly scrutinize existing policies and established procedures, striving tirelessly to guarantee that justice is dispensed with absolute fairness and that the rehabilitation programs are, in practice, genuinely efficacious. Of late, their deliberations have centered upon the enigmatic case of Sisyphus and what his unique punishment might reveal about the inherent strengths and potential limitations of their established system. His extraordinary ability to manipulate and circumvent divine bureaucracy has prompted an exhaustive review of the protocols for managing truly unusual and unprecedented cases. The fundamental issue, Minos sagely observes during one of their solemn meetings, his voice resonating with ancient authority, is that our meticulously crafted system was primarily designed to address the transgressions of normal souls with conventional crimes. We simply did not anticipate an individual who would perceive divine authority itself as merely another intricate problem to be ingeniously solved. Yet that is precisely why his punishment is so exquisitely fitting, Rhadamanthus retorts, his argument infused with a sense of poetic justice. He dedicated his entire mortal life to the relentless pursuit of solving the unsolvable. Now, he is granted the singular opportunity to spend eternity engaged in the very same Sisyphean endeavor. Chutia, Aeacus, ever the pragmatist, interjects with a distinct and more immediate concern. What would transpire if his punishment, against all expectations, actually proved effective? What if he were to eventually cultivate genuine humility and profound acceptance? Would we then be compelled to release him from his eternal burden? This indeed presents a truly fascinating and deeply philosophical quandary. The underworld's carefully constructed rehabilitation programs are inherently designed with the ultimate goal of eventual success, of guiding souls towards enlightenment and redemption. Yet Sisyphus was explicitly sentenced to an eternal punishment. The core conflict arises: what happens when the imperative of eternal punishment clashes directly with the overarching objective of helping souls to learn, to grow, and to ultimately transcend their past failings? This particular brand of philosophical puzzle is precisely the sort of intellectual stimulation that keeps the underworld perpetually engaging for its permanent inhabitants. They are not merely overseeing a cosmic penal institution. They are actively participating in an ongoing grand experiment in the very nature of justice, the boundless potential for personal growth, and the profound possibility of redemption. As one traverses the underworld's hushed and contemplative districts in the twilight hours, or what approximates evening in a realm perpetually devoid of a natural sun, one might encounter souls from across the vast expanse of history engaged in earnest discussion of these profound questions. A Roman philosopher might be seen earnestly debating ethical principles with a serene Chinese sage. A Babylonian astronomer could be sharing intricate celestial observations with an astute Egyptian mathematician. A formidable Norse warrior might be learning nuanced lessons about honor from a wise Polynesian navigator. The underworld, it ultimately reveals itself, is not merely a terminal destination for the deceased. It is, in fact, a vibrant intellectual crucible where the most profound inquiries concerning existence, justice, and the very essence of human nature are rigorously explored by minds liberated from the immediate, often mundane pressures of mortal life. It functions as a sprawling cosmic university, its curriculum encompassing everything from the foundational tenets of basic ethics to the most esoteric aspects of reality's fundamental nature. And somewhere within this immense and intricate realm, Sisyphus continues his relentless exertion, pushing his immense boulder up the endless mountain, perhaps, with each arduous ascent, gradually internalizing lessons that will one day transform him into a person profoundly different from the clever, hubristic king who once believed he could outmaneuver the very essence of death itself. While our narrative has closely followed Sisyphus and his tumultuous relationship with the inevitability of mortality, other mortals across the ancient Hellenic world have been experiencing their own unique encounters with death, some proving considerably more successful than others. The poignant and heroic tale of Alcestis and Admetus presents us with a markedly different approach to challenging the dominion of death, one fundamentally rooted in the profound power of self-sacrificing love, rather than the cunning machinations of intellect. Imagine yourself transported to the ancient kingdom of Pherae in Thessaly, a verdant land ruled by King Admetus, a sovereign celebrated throughout all of Greece for his inherent kindness, unwavering commitment to justice, and profound devotion to the Olympian gods. In stark contrast to Sisyphus, who appeared to treat the divine powers as mere obstacles to be ingeniously overcome, Admetus harbored a genuine and deeply felt reverence for the gods, earnestly striving to conduct his life in accordance with their sacred wishes. This devout respect ultimately yielded an unanticipated and extraordinary reward when Apollo, the radiant god of music, prophecy, and the sun, found himself temporarily banished from the resplendent heights of Mount Olympus. This exile was a punitive measure for his transgression of slaying the Cyclopes, the primordial giants who had forged Zeus's formidable thunderbolts. Apollo was consequently sentenced to serve a mortal king for the duration of 1 terrestrial year. He possessed the divine prerogative to choose any monarch across the breadth of Greece. Yet, remarkably, he selected Admetus. For a full 12 months, the resplendent god of music humbly discharged the duties of a simple shepherd, diligently tending Admetus's expansive flocks amidst the rolling hills that cradled Pheræ. One might reasonably envision this arrangement as fraught with inherent difficulties. A proud and powerful deity reduced to performing mortal labor, and a mortal king grappling with the unprecedented challenge of how to appropriately treat a divine servant. Yet, against all conventional expectations, the arrangement flourished with surprising harmony. Admetus extended to Apollo the same profound kindness and respect he bestowed upon all his subjects. He never presumptuously demanded to know which of his shepherds was, in actuality, a god in disguise. He simply ensured that all his pastoral workers, whether divine or otherwise, were consistently well-fed, fairly compensated for their labors, and treated with an unwavering dignity. Apollo, for his part, embraced his temporary duties with a characteristic divine enthusiasm. Under his benevolent care, Admetus's flocks prospered to an extent never before witnessed. The sheep yielded the finest, most lustrous wool in all of Thessaly. The goats produced milk so exceptionally rich that it seemed to shimmer with captured sunshine. Even the humble shepherds' huts, under Apollo's subtle influence, became places imbued with an unexpected beauty, as the god could not help but impart harmony and grace to every single thing he touched. When the prescribed year of divine service concluded, Apollo genuinely felt a pang of sorrow at the prospect of his departure. He had grown remarkably fond of the simple, rhythmic tranquility of pastoral life, and he deeply appreciated Admetus's consistent kindness. As a poignant parting gift, he bestowed upon the king an extraordinary and truly remarkable boon. When Admetus's destined time to die inevitably arrived, he would possess the unique ability to evade death's grasp, provided he could locate someone genuinely willing to sacrifice their own life in his stead. At that specific moment, this seemed like a magnanimous, yet largely theoretical, gift. Admetus was then in the prime of his youth, robustly healthy, and lived a meticulously careful life. Death, consequently, felt like a very distant and abstract concept. He expressed his profound gratitude to Apollo with sincere grace, and subsequently gave little further thought to the matter. Years unfolded peacefully and uneventfully. Admetus eventually married Alcestis, the virtuous daughter of King Peleus, in a ceremony that famously required him to accomplish an seemingly impossible feat, yoking both a ferocious lion and a wild boar to his chariot. Apollo, still deeply grateful for Admetus's earlier kindness, secretly intervened to assist him in successfully completing this formidable task. Their marriage was blessed with profound happiness, enriched by the joyous arrival of children, and an abundance of prosperity. However, as it is the inescapable fate for all mortals, Admetus's appointed time eventually arrived. Not through the ravages of war or an unforeseen accident, but through a sudden, debilitating illness that cruelly struck him down in what should have been the zenith of his life. As he lay languishing, with the most skilled physicians in all of Greece utterly powerless to alleviate his suffering, he vividly recalled Apollo's extraordinary gift, the promise of someone willing to die in his place. The condition had appeared deceptively simple and straightforward when Apollo had first uttered it. But now, confronting his own imminent mortality, Admetus acutely realized the agonizing complexity and profound moral weight of such a request. How does one even begin to ask another human being to surrender their very life for one's own? How does one even broach such a profoundly delicate and devastating topic in conversation? His immediate concern revolved around his elderly parents. They had experienced full, rich lives and might be inclined to undertake this ultimate act of selflessness for their beloved son. With profound reluctance and a sense of deep shame, he approached his father, his heart heavy with the impossible request. "Father," he began, his voice barely a whisper, a palpable struggle etched into his features as he sought the precise words for such an extraordinary plea. "I am compelled to ask a favor of you, a favor of immense and profound magnitude." As he painstakingly recounted the dire circumstances, his father listened with an air of profound contemplation, his expression thoughtful and unreadable. Then, with a gentle but unwavering resolve, he demurred. "My dear son, my affection for you is boundless, yet I am not yet prepared to relinquish my hold on this mortal coil. There remain endeavors I wish to pursue, landscapes I long to behold. While I have indeed been blessed with a lengthy existence, I have not yet concluded the act of living it." His mother's response mirrored his father, sentiment with striking similarity. She expressed profound empathy for his predicament, her eyes reflecting a shared sorrow, but she too harbored the conviction that her life's tapestry was not yet fully woven. There were beloved grandchildren whose growth she yearned to witness, vibrant gardens she wished to cultivate, and untold stories she longed to bring to their conclusion. Admetus found himself in the peculiar and deeply unsettling position of experiencing disappointment in his parents for their very desire to persist in life. It struck him as inherently selfish, a notion that individuals who had already savored extensive lifespans would not willingly sacrifice themselves for someone younger. Yet, concurrently, he found himself utterly incapable of truly blaming them. Who, after all, willingly embraces an untimely demise, even for those they cherish most deeply? He extended his desperate appeals to his closest companions, his most devoted retainers, and even to his more distant kin. The ensuing dialogues were fraught with an almost indescribable awkwardness, each interaction a torturous dance around the unspeakable. How, indeed, does one articulate such a request? "Would you consider relinquishing your life so that mine might continue?" The phrase itself resounded with an inherent dread, regardless of its precise articulation. Some individuals offered a litany of hesitant excuses, their gazes averted. Others flatly and unequivocally refused, their rejection immediate and absolute. A select few appeared to genuinely ponder the gravity of the proposition before ultimately concluding that they could not, in good conscience, proceed with such a monumental sacrifice. All who were approached subsequently regarded Admetus with a subtly altered perception, as if the mere act of posing the question had irrevocably reshaped the very fabric of their relationships. As the days inexorably advanced, and his physical condition continued its distressing decline, Admetus began to succumb to an overwhelming sense of despair. Apollo's benevolent offering, which had initially seemed so magnanimous and full of promise, was proving to be utterly without utility. It became agonizingly clear that apparently no one held sufficient affection for him to willingly surrender their own life in his stead. This devastating realization was almost more excruciatingly painful than the looming specter of death itself. It was at this critical juncture that Alcestis, his devoted wife, made a momentous decision, one that would immortalize her name throughout the annals of Greek history for countless centuries to come. She approached him with a quiet grace one fateful evening, as he lay prostrate, weak, and racked with fever upon their marriage bed. The chamber was bathed in a subdued gloom, illuminated solely by the flickering amber light of oil lamps that cast an ethereal ballet of dancing shadows upon the ancient walls. Beyond the confines of their dwelling, the vibrant cacophony of the city was gradually subsiding, settling into the tranquil, rhythmic cadence of the approaching night. "I have been deeply contemplating your difficult predicament," she uttered softly, taking a seat beside him and gently enveloping his hand in hers, a gesture of profound comfort and unwavering support. "Do not," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion, his eyes pleading with an unspoken anguish. "Please, I implore you, do not. I cannot possibly ask this of you." "You are not asking," she responded with a serene composure, her voice a balm to his tormented soul. "I am offering." The ensuing dialogue was utterly unlike anything recorded in the legendary narratives of Sisyphus's intricate and cunning machinations. There was no trace of duplicity, no manipulative ploys, no desperate attempts to unearth legal loopholes or exploit technicalities. It was, rather, the pure and unadulterated expression of a woman's profound love for her husband, as she articulated, with unwavering clarity, the profound reasons why she was prepared to embrace death so that his life might endure. "Our beloved children are in dire need of a father's guiding presence," she declared, her gaze unwavering as she articulated her unwavering conviction. "The kingdom itself requires the steady hand of a sovereign, and as for me, I would far rather experience a curtailed existence, yet one imbued with the profound solace of knowing that you continue to grace this world, than to endure a longer life burdened by the desolate knowledge of your absence." Admetus, in his desperation, attempted to reason with her, to explore alternative solutions, to implore her to reconsider her formidable resolve. But Alcestis's mind was irrevocably made up, fortified by the same quiet, unyielding determination that characterized all her pivotal decisions. She was not acting out of a sudden, desperate impulse or a moment of fleeting despair. Instead, she was making a meticulously considered choice, one deeply rooted in her profound understanding of the intrinsic values of love and unwavering duty. The actual transition occurred with a surprising and almost ethereal gentleness. Thanatos, the somber deity of death, materialized within their chamber, much as he had once appeared within the opulent halls of Sisyphus's palace. However, this time, there were no restraining chains, no deceitful stratagems, no frantic attempts at desperate bargaining. Alcestis simply rose to her feet, bestowed a tender farewell kiss upon her husband's lips, and departed with death as naturally and serenely as if she were merely embarking on a casual visit to a nearby neighbor. Admetus experienced an immediate and miraculous recovery. Apollo's divine boon functioned precisely as had been promised. The very instant Alcestis breathed her last, his debilitating illness vanished without a trace, and his strength surged back into his being. Yet this profound victory felt utterly devoid of any genuine triumph. He was undeniably alive, but at a staggering cost that rendered life itself almost unbearable. The inhabitants of Phyrae mourned Alcestis with an intensity and depth of sorrow they had never before experienced for anyone. She had not succumbed to a tragic accident, a debilitating illness, or the gentle embrace of old age. She had perished for love, offering herself as the ultimate sacrifice for the well-being of her cherished family and the prosperity of her kingdom. Her funeral rites transcended a mere ceremony of grief. They transformed into a poignant celebration of the most exalted virtues humanity could aspire to achieve. However, the narrative does not conclude with this somber note. For unlike Sisyphus's solitary and self-serving struggle against the inexorable cosmic forces, Alcestis's selfless act of sacrifice resonated deeply, touching the very hearts of both divine beings and mortal men alike. Her profound act of self-abnegation generated ripples that spread far beyond the immediate confines of her own family. News of her extraordinary deed reached the ears of Heracles, the illustrious hero, who was, at that very moment, journeying through Phyrae en route to accomplish one of his legendary and arduous labors. Upon his arrival at Admetus's royal palace, he discovered his old friend enveloped in a profound state of mourning, extending hospitality to his guests with a mechanical courtesy that belied the evident brokenness of his heart. Heracles, a demigod who had valiantly confronted monstrous beasts, defied powerful deities, and overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges, was profoundly moved by the harrowing tale of Alcestis's supreme sacrifice. Here, indeed, was an individual who had conquered death, not through brute force or cunning intellect, but through the purest, most unadulterated form of love. It seemed fundamentally unjust that such a magnificent victory should culminate in such a devastating tragedy. Therefore, Heracles made a momentous decision, one that would have appeared utterly preposterous to anyone familiar solely with the story of Sisyphus. He resolved to engage in a direct confrontation with death itself, to wrestle with Thanatos, and to reclaim that which the grim reaper had so cruelly claimed. The epic struggle between Heracles and Thanatos transpired within the nebulous, shadowy realm that lies betwixt life and death, a liminal space where raw physical might held less sway than the indomitable strength of will. Heracles fought not for personal glory, nor for any self-serving advantage, but for the profound principle that a love as pure and potent as Alcestis's should not go unrewarded. And somehow, against all conceivable odds, he emerged victorious. His triumph was not achieved through elaborate trickery or exploiting legalistic technicalities, but through sheer, unyielding determination fueled by an unshakable moral conviction. Thanatos, confronted by an adversary who fought purely for the sake of love rather than any personal benefit, found himself utterly incapable of maintaining his relentless grip on Alcestis's valiant soul. When Heracles, in a moment of unparalleled heroism, restored Alcestis to life and reunited her with her husband's loving embrace, it represented a fundamentally different kind of triumph over death than the one Sisyphus had so cunningly orchestrated. Where Sisyphus had relentlessly endeavored to evade death through his prodigious cleverness, Alcestis had willingly embraced death through the boundless power of love, and love, as it irrevocably turned out, proved to be a force far more formidable than either human ingenuity or the cold grasp of death itself. The joyous reunion of Alcestis and Admetus swiftly attained legendary status throughout the entirety of Greece, yet its renown was not celebrated in the manner one might initially anticipate. It was not lauded as a monumental triumph of heroic strength or a spectacular display of divine intervention. Instead, it was revered and remembered as irrefutable proof that genuine self-sacrifice and profound love inherently forge their own unique and formidable power, a transcendent force that even the sovereign entity of death itself is compelled to acknowledge and respect. As the gentle twilight descends upon the magnificent palace of Pheerae, with Alcestis and Admetus observing their children frolicking playfully in the sun-drenched courtyard, one might pause to reflect upon the striking divergence of this narrative from the cautionary tale of Sisyphus. Both accounts feature mortal beings daring to challenge the inexorable dominion of death, yet they do so through diametrically opposed methodologies. Sisyphus, driven by self-preservation, meticulously plotted and schemed to circumvent death through his individualistic cleverness, perceiving it as a complex problem to be ingeniously resolved through superior intellect. Alcestis, conversely, embraced death through the transcendent power of love, viewing it as a profound sacrifice that could ultimately serve a greater, more noble good. One approach, as history records, led to an eternity of agonizing punishment. The other, miraculously, culminated in resurrection and an enduring happiness. Now, let us delve into yet another distinctive approach to confronting the seemingly impossible, one that does not rely upon the intricate cleverness exemplified by Sisyphus, nor the selfless sacrifice embodied by Alcestis, but rather on the pure, unadulterated power of art and the ethereal beauty of music. Envision yourself transported to the verdant, undulating hills of Thrace, nestled in the northern reaches of Greece, where the most exquisite and soul-stirring music in the entire world reverberates across the tranquil valleys. This celestial music emanates from Orpheus, the revered son of the muse Calliope, and widely acclaimed as the most accomplished musician who has ever graced the earth. When Orpheus delicately plucks the strings of his lyre and raises his voice in song, even the wildest and most untamed creatures of the forest gather peacefully, captivated by the melodic enchantment. Majestic trees, as if animated by an unseen force, uproot themselves from the earth to draw nearer to the source of his divine music. Even the stoic, unyielding stones are moved to shed tears at the sheer, overwhelming beauty of his intricate melodies. But on this particular night, the usually vibrant hills of Thrace are enveloped in a profound, unsettling silence. Orpheus sits motionless beside a freshly dug grave, his cherished lyre resting untouched in his lap, his gaze fixed upon the earth that now tenderly embraces his beloved wife, Eurydice. The pervasive silence is far more profound and deafening than any musical composition he has ever brought forth, for it represents the agonizing absence of the singular person whose voice he adored more deeply than his own. Eurydice had met her tragic demise on the very day of their wedding, not from the ravages of illness or the gentle onset of old age, but from the venomous bite of a serpent as she desperately fled the unwanted and aggressive advances of another man. The tragedy was shockingly sudden, utterly senseless, and devastatingly complete. One moment, she was laughing joyously at their wedding feast, her face radiant with an infectious happiness. The next, she was irrevocably gone, leaving Orpheus utterly alone with his unparalleled music and his crushing, inconsolable grief. For countless days, Orpheus has valiantly attempted to sing, to unearth some melody that could adequately articulate the profound depths of his sorrow. Yet every attempted song inevitably devolves into a lament so utterly heartbreaking that even he, the master musician, finds himself unable to continue its mournful strains. The music that once bestowed boundless joy upon all who heard it now serves only to amplify and intensify his own personal sorrow. As he lingers in the encroaching darkness, Orpheus makes a monumental decision, one that will either utterly destroy him or, against all odds, achieve the seemingly impossible. He resolves to undertake a journey that no living person has ever dared to attempt before. He will descend into the chilling depths of the underworld and implore Hades, the formidable ruler of the dead, to restore his wife to the realm of the living. Unlike Sisyphus, who meticulously plotted and cunningly schemed to artfully evade his own demise, Orpheus harbors no intention of deceiving anyone. And in stark contrast to Alcestis, he is not prepared to willingly sacrifice his own life for the sake of love. His audacious plan is both simpler and perhaps even more daring than either of the previous approaches. He will sing for the formidable gods of the dead, holding on to the fragile hope that the ethereal power of music can accomplish what brute force and clever stratagems cannot. The arduous pilgrimage into the chthonic dominion commences at one of the subterranean portals to the realm of the deceased, a formidable grotto nestled within the mountainous terrain, where the penumbral depths beckoned, suggesting an abyss more profound than any terrestrial cavern should logically extend. Orpheus, the renowned minstrel, ventured into this profound obscurity, his sole possession being his resonant lyre, meticulously tracing pathways that living feet were unequivocally forbidden to traverse. His initial formidable encounter awaited him in the form of Charon, the ancient mariner tasked with ferrying souls across the desolate waters of the river Styx. Charon adhered to unyielding ordinances. Only the departed were permitted passage across the infernal current, and they were moreover obliged to furnish the requisite obol for their journey. Orpheus, visibly pulsating with vitality, was conspicuously devoid of the customary toll. "Retreat from this forbidden threshold," Charon commanded, his utterance resonant with the ceaseless lapping of infernal currents against ancient bedrock, conveyed an unyielding finality. The living possess no legitimate purpose nor rightful claim within the sovereign territory of the dead. Instead of engaging in futile disputations or attempts at negotiation, Orpheus simply commenced to weave a tapestry of melody. His song articulated the saga of profound affection, not merely his personal devotion to Eurydice, but love in its myriad manifestations, the fervent and protective maternal bonds, the unwavering camaraderie that endures through adversity, and humanity's innate reverence for the ephemeral splendor of existence into which they are born and from which they must inevitably depart. As his voice resonated, an unfathomable transformation transpired. Charon, who had plied his solitary trade across the somber waters for untold epochs, impervious to sentiment, found unbidden rivulets of sorrow tracing paths upon his time-worn visage. The song did not employ artifice nor persuade him to transgress established ordinances. It simply stirred his dormant sensibilities to such a profound degree that he found himself utterly incapable of refusing passage to the gifted singer. "Sing again when you return," Charon murmured, his voice imbued with a newfound fragility, as Orpheus boarded the ancient skiff. The very essence of aesthetic grace had long since receded from my memory. The identical phenomenon unfolded with remarkable consistency as Orpheus made his way further into the abyssal depths of the netherworld. Every formidable sentinel, every formidable impediment, every preternatural trial was subdued not by brute strength nor cunning stratagem, but through the compelling efficacy of his melodic artistry. Cerberus, the multi-headed canine sentinel, who stood eternal watch over the portals of the infernal monarch, reclined in placid repose, his sextet of watchful orbs gently shuttered, as Orpheus sang a serene ballad extolling the tranquil solace following arduous and devoted labor. The dog's 3 mouths, which had instilled profound dread in innumerable passing spirits, contorted into an approximation of benign geniality. The Furies, those dreadful Erinyes, relentless agents of retribution who hounded the culpable with unflagging zeal, halted their ceaseless pursuit to listen to a hymn articulating the virtues of absolution and spiritual deliverance. For the first time in their existence, a novel sensation, utterly distinct from their perpetual fury, permeated their ancient beings. Even the eternally suffering spirits in the underworld found fleeting respite from their interminable penance. The perpetually parched Tantalus, whose outstretched hands forever pursued elusive sustenance, momentarily transcended his agonizing cravings while listening to Orpheus's melodies. The indefatigable Sisyphus, engaged in his relentless ascent with the colossal stone, interrupted his infernal toil, permitting the massive rock to settle while he imbibed the profound aesthetic pleasure of the music. Tidings of the mortal minstrel propagated with astonishing celerity throughout the underworld. Spectral denizens converged upon Orpheus's trajectory, compelled by harmonies that evoked poignant reminiscences of terrestrial splendors foregone. The chthonic dominion had never before resonated with such unparalleled sonic artistry. Finally, Orpheus reached the august audience chamber of the sovereign rulers of the deceased, Hades and Persephone, the dread monarch and consort of the netherworld. This was the very court that Sisyphus had once beguiled with his administrative guile, the same formidable powers that Alcestis had petitioned through an act of selfless immolation. But Orpheus approached them through unadulterated aesthetic articulation. Standing before the 2 formidable thrones, Orpheus commenced his pivotal and transcendent rendition. He sang about Eurydice, not merely dwelling upon her untimely demise, but extolling the profound depth of his devotion to her. He sang about her infectious mirth, even at his most abysmal jests, about her gentle accompaniment to his melodies, often off-key, yet invariably imbued with unadulterated delight, about her perceptive gaze upon the world, characterized by an innate inquisitiveness and tender benevolence. But more than that, he sang about the very essence of love as an elemental cosmic energy, how it engenders aesthetic splendor, fosters organic flourishing, and interweaves all animated existence. He sang about the poignant sorrow of affection prematurely severed, and the lamentable squandering of innate grace before its destined fruition. As he sang, a heretofore unparalleled occurrence transpired in the throne room of the dead. Persephone, the sovereign of the chthonic realms, found tears cascading from her eyes. These were not born of despondency, but of profound empathetic resonance. She recalled her personal narrative of romantic attachment and her poignant severance from the verdant, life-affirming realm of the upper world. Even Hades, the austere deity of the departed, who had been privy to the entire spectrum of human anguish, experienced an unexpected stirring of his formidable resolve. He had observed innumerable harrowing calamities, yet never encountered their transmutation into such exquisite artistry. The music did not seek to negate the inexorable truth of mortality, nor to logically refute its dominion. Instead, it illuminated the profound capacity of love to forge significance even amidst the stark inevitability of bereavement. When the song concluded, the hallowed chamber remained enveloped in a profound, lingering silence. Then the formidable Hades uttered words. His tone softened to a degree unheard for untold millennia. "Orpheus," he declared, "your music has accomplished a feat I deemed utterly unattainable. You have infused the very dominion of demise with an ethereal aesthetic, and in doing so, you have recalled to our ancient minds that mortality itself can possess a solemn grandeur when intrinsically woven into the grand tapestry of enduring affection." Persephone inclined her regal form upon her seat of power. "We will restore Eurydice to your earthly companionship," she affirmed. "Your profound devotion to her, eloquently articulated through your artistic mastery, has demonstrated an efficacy surpassing the very dominion of death." Orpheus struggled to comprehend the improbable declaration he was hearing. Where the cunning stratagems of Sisyphus had ultimately proven ineffectual, and the selfless immolation of Alcestis necessitated celestial intercession for its eventual triumph, his unparalleled musicality had, by its inherent potency, achieved the utterly unattainable. But then the infernal monarch lifted a cautionary hand. "There is one singular stipulation," he stated, and suddenly Orpheus felt the oppressive burden of celestial restriction descended upon his hard-won victory. "Eurydice will accompany you on your egress to the terrestrial sphere, but you are strictly forbidden to cast your gaze upon her until your joint departure from our chthonic domain is absolute and complete. Should you glance backward ere attaining the sunlit world, she shall be irrevocably forfeited to you." It was a condition that possessed an inherent logical consistency, yet simultaneously defied rational comprehension. What inscrutable divine calculus compelled the bestowal of such an extraordinary boon, only to encumber it with so formidable a caveat? But Orpheus offered no protestation. He had traversed too great a distance and accomplished too monumental a feat to jeopardize his entire endeavor with inquisitive challenges. Now, the homeward ascent to the terrestrial realm commenced, suffused with exhilaration and profound expectation. Orpheus perceived the faint cadence of Eurydice's steps trailing in his wake, felt her ethereal proximity accompanying him along the tenebrous passages leading to renewed vitality. They traversed anew the very locales where his melodic enchantment had previously wrought its wondrous effects. Cerberus, the multi-headed guardian, remained steeped in tranquil slumber. The Erinyes persisted in their unwonted stillness. The suffering spirits continued their repose from their arduous toils. But as they climbed higher, approaching the boundary between death and life, an insidious tendril of apprehension commenced its infiltration into Orpheus's consciousness. No audible respiration, No familiar vocal resonance reached his ears. Could it be that the deities had orchestrated a cruel deception? Was he progressing in solitary delusion, convinced of his wife's restoration, whilst she remained, in grim reality, ensnared in the abyssal confines? The corrosive uncertainty intensified with every measured advance. He found himself exerting every faculty of hearing to discern any auditory verification of her genuine presence. A gentle swish of drapery, a whispered exhalation, or even the soft cadence of weeping, any tangible proof to dispel the gnawing suspicion of his delusion. Finally, mere paces from the threshold of the sunlit world, on the precipice of culminating his seemingly insurmountable odyssey, Orpheus's resolve fractured irrevocably. He abruptly pivoted, driven by an overwhelming imperative to visually confirm Eurydice's corporeal reality and the verity of his hard-won victory. And there she was, ethereally lovely, imbued with a profound sorrow, and already commencing her spectral dissolution. In accordance with the divine decree's instantaneous enforcement, she extended a translucent hand to caress his visage in a final, fleeting gesture, her ghostly digits permeating his flesh like an ephemeral vapor. Why? A single plaintive query escaped her fading lips. Then, with an agonizing finality, she vanished, inexorably reclaimed by chthonic powers that transcended even the potent forces of affection and melody. Orpheus endeavored to pursue her into the receding gloom, but the passages that had previously yielded to his passage now stood impenetrably sealed. His once irresistible music, which had vanquished every impediment on his initial descent, proved utterly impotent in forging a second access to the realm of the departed. The divine dispensation had bestowed a singular miracle, which his inherent mortal frailty tragically abrogated. He re-emerged into the blinding glare of the sun, a solitary figure burdened with the crushing realization that he, more than any other mortal, had approached the absolute conquest of death, only for his intrinsic human imperfection to wrest devastating defeat from the very jaws of triumph. For the remainder of his earthly existence, Orpheus roamed the terrestrial sphere, weaving melodies of unparalleled beauty and profound melancholia, unmatched in their evocative power throughout history. His lyrical compositions recounted the epic narrative of his descent into the netherworld, the tale of a love that verged on overcoming mortality, and the inherent human propensity to sabotage our most monumental achievements through the corrosive forces of uncertainty and trepidation. Yet, arguably, the genuine apotheosis of Orpheus's saga resided not in the ephemeral rejoining with Eurydice, but rather in the enduring legacy of his musical artistry. His poignant ballads, exploring themes of affection and bereavement, continued to resonate deeply within human hearts for generations subsequent to his earthly departure. In a profound sense, his creative expression attained a transcendence that his personal odyssey ultimately failed to secure. It transmuted profound sorrow into something aesthetically exquisite and eternally resonant, an artistic legacy capable of stirring the sensibilities of countless others and providing solace to those confronting their personal experiences of profound deprivation. Our narrative expedition, exploring the diverse methodologies employed by mortals in their defiance of death, culminates at last in the most unadorned and confrontational strategy imaginable, a direct subjugation of mortality through an overwhelming display of corporeal might and unyielding resolve. This is the characteristic modus operandi of Heracles, the preeminent champion of Hellenic antiquity, whose direct encounter with Thanatos, the personification of death, epitomized the supreme trial of human volition, pitted against an immutable cosmic power. Imagine yourself transported to the undulating terrain beyond Phere, where we previously observed Alcestis and Admetus enjoying a blissful existence subsequent to her wondrous restoration from the clutches of demise. However, our present narrative compels a temporal regression to the precise juncture when Heracles initially became cognizant of Alcestis's supreme act of self-abnegation, and consequently resolved that such an extraordinary demonstration of affection merited unequivocal recompense. Heracles arrived at the palace of King Admetus during the waning daylight hours, his form grimed by his journey, and his spirit anticipating the generous welcome of a long-standing companion. He found himself in a brief respite from his arduous undertakings, having just concluded the formidable capture of the Erymanthian boar, and steeling himself for his next impossible challenge. These interludes between his mythic ordeals were invaluable to him, moments when he could almost experience the existence of an ordinary individual, rather than a hero fated to prove himself through perpetual tests. Yet, upon reaching the royal dwelling, an unsettling disquiet permeated the air. The customary vibrant noises of a flourishing royal court were hushed and suppressed. Servants moved with hushed footsteps, communicating in subdued murmurs. The atmosphere was laden with profound sorrow, though Heracles could not at once discern the specific calamity that had transpired. Admetus encountered him at the threshold, and Heracles was taken aback by the stark transformation of his comrade's visage. The king seemed to have endured the passage of several years within a mere lunar cycle since their last meeting. His face was haggard and emaciated, his eyes inflamed from incessant tears, and he bore himself with the heavy gait of one burdened by an insufferable sorrow. "My friend," Heracles inquired, his voice laced with concern, "what dire event has befallen this place?" Admetus grappled with the formidable task of articulating his anguish. How does one convey to another that one's wife willingly offered her existence as a ransom for his own? How does one elucidate the singular torment of sorrow that arises from enduring life, yet forever indebted to another's ultimate sacrifice? "There has been a catastrophic bereavement," Admetus eventually uttered, his voice strained. "A terrible loss, but please, as my esteemed visitor, you deserve the customary courtesies. Let us divert our conversation to more agreeable subjects." In strict adherence to the venerable traditions of Hellenic Xenia, Admetus endeavored to conceal his profound sorrow and furnish appropriate diversion for his guest. A sumptuous repast was arrayed, vintage libations were poured, and bards plied their instruments, though their music resonated with a strained, melancholic air, devoid of genuine joy. Heracles, perceiving the palpable anguish of his companion, yet honoring the sanctity of his unspoken suffering, sought to ameliorate the somber atmosphere with animated accounts of his latest heroic endeavors. Nevertheless, the unvarnished reality could not remain perpetually veiled. A loyal attendant from the royal household, stirred by the hero's authentic empathy, recounted the complete narrative of Alcestis's extraordinary self-sacrifice. She had voluntarily surrendered her own existence to preserve that of her spouse, departing alongside the grim specter of mortality with an astonishing serenity, as though merely embarking upon a casual call to an adjacent dwelling. The attendant concluded by explaining how the palace had been engulfed in an unbroken pall of sorrow from that fateful moment onward. When Heracles was apprised of the tragic events, his response was instantaneous and profoundly vehement. This emotion transcended mere sorrow at the loss of a virtuous woman. It was an incandescent fury at the profound inequity of it all. Alcestis epitomized the most sublime virtues of humankind: affection, selflessness, unwavering fidelity, and indomitable spirit. That such a person should have succumbed to the dominion of Thanatos, while innumerable individuals characterized by malevolence and egocentricity enjoyed extended existences, appeared to him as an egregious violation of natural order. "Where is she interred?" he demanded of the attendant. "She is not, my lord." Thanatos came for her personally. Her corporeal form simply dissolved into incorporeal mist as she walked with him. There were no physical remains left to be interred. This detail served only to intensify Heracles' righteous indignation. Not only had Thanatos merely claimed a virtuous soul prematurely, but he had also cruelly withheld from her bereaved kin the solace of customary funerary obsequies. It was an egregious affront, compounded atop an already devastating calamity. Heracles forged a resolution that would strike any ordinary mortal as utterly beyond the realm of possibility, were it not for the fact that he had devoted his existence to the achievement of the seemingly unattainable. He decided to pursue the elusive deity of demise and forcibly retrieve that which he had illicitly purloined. Unlike Sisyphus, who employed cunning stratagems and artful deceptions, or Orpheus, who leveraged the enchanting potency of melody, Heracles intended to deploy his paramount attribute, his peerless corporeal might, and his unwavering obstinacy in the face of adversity. He was going to grapple with the very embodiment of mortality until its capitulation. The initial formidable obstacle lay in the very act of locating Thanatos. The god of death possesses no permanent abode, nor adheres to any predictable temporal itinerary. He manifests capriciously at the precise moment and location decreed for a mortal's demise, then recedes into the ether to fulfill the subsequent engagement on his interminable roster. But Heracles had acquired, through his myriad heroic undertakings, the singular acumen required to pursue entities that assiduously evade detection. He discerned the faint, intangible vestiges that bespoke Thanatos' transit across the earthly realm, places where blossoms inexplicably withered without visible cause, where fauna became agitated and avian melodies fell silent. Death's presence left a distinct ethereal imprint that Heracles, with his acutely honed perceptions, could readily detect. The elusive trail ultimately guided him to a convergence of pathways situated beyond the city's confines, a place where multiple routes intersected beneath the venerable boughs of an archaic olive tree. This was a locus traditionally favored by Thanatos for his manifestations, an interstitial zone, impartial to the domains of vitality and dissolution, bridging the terrestrial sphere and the enigmatic abyss that lay beyond. As twilight deepened, Heracles maintained his vigil beneath the ancient arboreal sentinel. His period of anticipation proved mercifully brief. As the final vestiges of daylight receded from the firmament, a spectral form materialized from the encroaching gloom, imposingly tall, enveloped in a somber cloak, and radiating an unequivocal aura of ultimate dominion. "Thanatos!" Heracles declared, rising resolutely to his full stature. "Heracles!" Thanatos responded, his tone devoid of astonishment at the confrontation. "I've been expecting you." "Then you are aware of my purpose in being here." You desire my return of Alcestis to life, but that is not the mechanism of death, champion. I do not relinquish that which I have claimed. We shall ascertain the truth of that assertion, Heracles retorted, and propelled himself with furious intent towards the very deity of dissolution. The ensuing confrontation transcended any struggle conceivable within the annals of human existence. It was far more than a mere corporeal contest, though Heracles deployed the entirety of his mythic prowess. It was a titanic struggle between the primordial forces of vitality and cessation, manifested in the clash of two entities who embodied the apex of their antithetical dominions. Thanatos contended with the unyielding dominion of termination, of cosmic decay, of the irresistible impetus towards ultimate finality. A mere brush from his spectral form could leech the very vigor from a being. His proximity alone had the power to engender profound hopelessness. Indeed, his essence itself symbolized the inherent pointlessness of all ephemeral strivings. Conversely, Heracles wielded an equally potent, albeit distinct, form of might, the indomitable human spirit's fierce rejection of the intolerable. He symbolized not solely brute corporeal might, but also the ethical fortitude that impels mortals to confront egregious wrongs, even when confronted by utterly insurmountable probabilities. His formidable potency derived its essence not merely from his musculature, but from his unshakable belief that certain principles warranted unwavering defense, irrespective of the ensuing ramifications. The monumental conflict endured throughout the nocturnal hours. They contended fiercely beneath the ancient olive tree, their titanic struggle convulsing the very ground and causing the surrounding atmosphere to pulsate with unleashed primal forces. At intervals, Thanatos appeared to assert his supremacy, and Heracles perceived his vital energies diminishing, his very essence being inexorably pulled towards the existential vacuum embodied by dissolution. Yet, each time he found himself teetering on the precipice of vanquishment, his mind conjured images of Alcestis, her serene bravery, her voluntary self-immolation, her profound devotion to her kin. He contemplated the king's inconsolable anguish and the inherent unfairness of virtuous individuals enduring such torment, while the grand celestial arrangement remained impervious to singular suffering. These profound reflections imbued him with a resurgence of power that transcended mere corporeal might. He was not merely contending for personal vindication, nor solely seeking to demonstrate his formidable capabilities. He contended for the profound conviction that affection and rectitude held intrinsic value within the cosmos, and that Thanatos ought not to be permitted to seize the noblest of souls without an arduous contest. With the nascent glimmer of approaching aurora, Heracles asserted his dominance in the brutal struggle. His formidable hold upon Thanatos intensified, and for the inaugural occasion in the deity's perpetual chronology, the embodiment of cessation discovered himself subjugated by the unwavering resolve of a mere mortal. "Release her," Heracles commanded with stern authority. His powerful hands clamped firmly about Thanatos' ethereal neck. "I cannot." Thanatos wheezed, his spectral form struggling. "The rules." "Then we shall shatter the rules," Heracles retorted, increasing the formidable constriction. "Some matters are of greater import than mere regulations." And in that moment, a truly unprecedented event transpired. Thanatos, confronted by a mortal whose unyielding conviction surpassed the very tenets of cosmic decree, made a decision that astonished both combatants. He conceded. Not due to a mere corporeal vanquishment, For deities cannot genuinely be annihilated by the might of ephemeral beings. But because Heracles had evinced a quality that even the immutable force of death was compelled to acknowledge, the formidable potency of unwavering ethical resolve, the champion's readiness to defy the foundational structure of reality in pursuit of affection and rectitude, generated a species of suzerainty that superseded conventional ordinances. "Very well," Thanatos pronounced, as Heracles finally relinquished his hold. "But understand, this does not establish a future standard. This is a singular dispensation granted for a truly singular circumstance." The selflessness of Alcestis's offering was of such unblemished purity, and your dedication to venerating that sacrifice so utterly profound, that the established cosmic framework was obligated to yield in recognition of such unparalleled rectitude. With a movement that appeared to exact a substantial toll upon his spectral form, Thanatos delved into the voluminous folds of his somber raiment and produced a distinct form, Alcestis, luminescent and otherworldly, yet undeniably possessing the spark of life. She gazed about her with a disoriented air, as though emerging from a profound slumber. "How?" she began, her voice faint. "Someone contended for you," Heracles elucidated with a tender inflection. "Someone determined that your sacrifice deserved to be honored with an equal sacrifice." As the golden orb of the sun ascended above the ancient crossroads, Heracles personally conducted Alcestis on her return journey to Pheræ, where her emotional re-encounter with Admetus was immediately woven into the fabric of enduring myth. But the true triumph extended far beyond the mere restoration of a virtuous woman to vitality. It resided in the profound elucidation that unwavering ethical certitude, when buttressed by the courage to translate that belief into decisive action, possesses the capacity to achieve feats deemed utterly unattainable. The extraordinary narrative of Heracles' direct confrontation with Thanatos rapidly disseminated across the Hellenic lands, yet it received varied interpretations among distinct populous groups. Some perceived it as irrefutable evidence that the most formidable champions could surmount any impediment through unadulterated resolve. Others perceived it as an affirmation that even the omnipotent deities, notwithstanding their supreme authority, harbored reverence for mortals who epitomized the most exalted virtues. The profoundest lesson, however, lay in a more nuanced understanding. Heracles did not vanquish Thanatos solely through the application of greater physical might. His triumph stemmed from the inherent righteousness of his endeavor and the unyielding totality of his dedication. His struggle was not motivated by individual advantage, but by an unwavering adherence to ethical precepts. He jeopardized his entire being, not for self-preservation, but to venerate the profound selflessness of another's ultimate offering. This particular approach stands in stark contrast to all the other strategies previously observed, which mortals have employed in their confrontations with demise. Sisyphus, for instance, relied heavily on his extraordinary cunning and ingenious deception, yet his endeavors ultimately served only his own narrow, self-serving interests. Alcestis achieved a form of triumph through her profound act of self-sacrifice, but tragically, she paid the ultimate, irreversible price for her devotion. Orpheus harnessed the captivating power of art and melody, attempting to sway the very forces of the underworld, only to be vanquished not by an external foe, but by the insidious specter of his own internal doubt and lack of faith. Heracles, however, triumphed through an unwavering moral strength, a deep-seated conviction that certain principles and noble causes are inherently worth contending for, irrespective of the daunting odds stacked against them, coupled with an unyielding readiness to translate that conviction into decisive, resolute action. His hard-won victory was far from a mere personal achievement. Instead, it powerfully reaffirmed the intrinsic value of virtue itself within a vast cosmic expanse that frequently appears utterly indifferent to the individual worth of its inhabitants. As this extensive narrative journey through the myriad tales of mortals daring to challenge death now approaches its conclusion, a diverse array of methodologies has been brought to light, ranging from sheer cleverness and profound sacrifice to artistic mastery and resolute moral conviction. Each of these distinct approaches possesses its own inherent validity and unique advantages, demonstrating remarkable ingenuity or profound dedication. Everyone has undeniably achieved remarkable feats, and concurrently has confronted its own inherent limitations and boundaries, revealing the fragile nature of even the most heroic efforts. Yet, perhaps the most profound revelation gleaned from these accounts is not centered on discerning which particular approach reigns supreme or is most effective. Instead, it might illuminate the quintessential human refusal to accept that any obstacle is truly insurmountable. It highlights the persistent, innate drive to push against established limitations, to expand the boundaries of the conceivable, even when the specter of certain failure looms ominously. Whether manifested through the intricate schemes devised by Sisyphus, the boundless love demonstrated by Alcestis, the enchanting music of Orpheus, or the formidable strength of Heracles, human beings perpetually endeavor to challenge the very parameters of existence itself. And in a deeply significant way, this steadfast refusal to yield to limitations, this unwavering insistence on envisioning something superior, something more expansive, something entirely beyond the confines of what appears achievable, could indeed represent the most defining characteristic of all humanity.